Hey everyone, welcome to TechStrong TV. Today is Thursday, October 15th. I hope you're all well and safe and ready for a great TechStrong TV show. This is Alan Schimmel, and we have a great show for you today. It's not really TV, it's video, but you might be watching it on your TV if you're watching it on our Amazon, Roku, or Apple TV, DevOps.com application, or maybe on our mobile app, our DevOps.com mobile app, which you then can cast to your TV. Of course, if not, you might be watching this on your computer or iPad, on YouTube, on our DevOps TV YouTube channel, or Facebook Live, LinkedIn Live, even Twitter for DevOps.com. Of course, all of our shows are also available on our Digital Anarchist website, as well as TechStrong TV. Go to TechStrong.tv and the rest of the MediaOps community sites, including DevOps.com, Container Journal, and of course Security Boulevard. But wherever you're watching it, you're still going to get the same show, and we hope you're enjoying it. We've got some really, really good content today for you. Let me tell you what we have in store. First of all, new company I want to introduce you to called Garden.io. They are all about cloud native testing, based out of Berlin. I met with their CEO, Jan Edevald, who's actually from Iceland, living in Berlin now. And Jan tells us what's going on with Garden and talk us about the whole cloud native testing space. They also have a great webinar coming up with us next week that you might want to, actually it's this week, that you might want to check in on, and we'll give you some information on that. So Jan Edevald from Garden.io. Next up, I have my friend Stephen Chin. Stephen, of course, is a senior director, developer relations at JFrog. And JFrog just this week, it was just this week, announced a new free tier of the JFrog Enterprise Service. It's free, no credit card, you just need your name and email. And you basically get, versions of the entire JFrog suite, including X-Ray and Artifactory and everything else, pipelines. And it is limited to how many users and release and so forth, but nevertheless, it's free, and it's a great way to get your company started in DevOps and CI/CD, or to just experiment and see what your company can do, or even if you're just on your own personal growth learning experience, you can see it. Next up, after Stephen, we have a great panel. We don't do a lot of panels on TechStrong TV. We tend to save them for our webinars and so forth. But we have, nevertheless, a great panel with you today. The panel features none other than Kelsey Hightower of Google, and Kelsey, of course, needs no introduction to our audience. Andy Glover of Netflix, and then Droidio and Isaac Mascara, CTO and CEO at Armory Networks. And it's a really good discussion about Spinnaker, latest kind of trends in CI/CD, enterprises, how enterprises are really automating their processes using tools like Spinnaker. And it's a really good discussion with some great references. And it, where the problems are, where the gains are, and what we can expect to see. It's a great panel. I don't want you to miss that one, so please stay tuned for that. After that, I'll be back. Well, actually, we'll turn things over to Charlene O'Hanlon, who's going to give us today's headlines around the MediaOps websites. And then Charlene has a good interview with James Carter of Logarithm. They just released their State of the Security Team and Are Executives the Problem? And we'll let James and Charlene talk to you about that. Then Charlene also has a great webinar preview of the rest of this week's webinars on MediaOps, and looking forward to next week. Then we'll head things over to the Analyst Corner with Mitchell Ashley, CEO, founder at Accelerated Strategies Group. We'll have some great commentary and video. And then we have a double header for you on our Mike Vizard on the channel roundup. Mike has an Onapsis CEO, Mariano Nunez, about the challenges associated with securing packaged applications in the cloud and on-prem. And then he also has a great interview with Morris Torres, Vice President of Product Platform Management of ServiceNow, about how DevOps and traditional approaches to ITSM are now converging more rapidly. And we are seeing that, and ServiceNow is one of the companies leading that charge. Also, I'll mention that we have a great low-code, no-code virtual event coming up in November called Low Code Today. And ServiceNow and their low-code division is a prime sponsor of the event, and we're going to have some really good information from them, as well as others in the low-code space. Stay tuned. There is a call for speakers out for that as well. Anyway, I'll be back after that to close things up. Wish you well. But for now, we're going to take a quick commercial break, and we'll be back in just a few moments with our first guest.
Ground control to Major Tom. Ground control to Major Tom. Turn up your CI/CD pipe and put your observability on. Ground control to Major Tom.
10, 9, ignition
Commencing
sequence
countdown, engines on.
6, 5,
Check ignition and may God's love be with you.
All right, as I mentioned, I have a new company I wanted to introduce you to today, and that is called Garden.io. They're new to our audience, but I think they've been around since about 2018. Jan Edevald is the founder CEO. Jan is from Iceland, living in Berlin, where the company is based now. And Garden.io is all about cloud native testing. Jan, it's one of these companies that was started because as a developer, Jan saw a hole, and it just irked him that there was no solution for this. So he went out and built one, and a company was born. The folks at Garden have a great webinar with us this week. It'll be in Charlene's preview. Do check it out. Sign up for that. I think if you're into cloud native testing at all, it'll be well worth your time. Here now is my conversation with Jan Edevald for Garden.io.
This is Digital Anarchist.
Hey everyone, it's Alan Schimmel here on TechStrong TV, and thanks for joining us on another segment. Our segment today features Jon Edevald. Jon is the CEO and founder of Garden.io. And Jon, welcome to TechStrong TV. Pleasure to have you here.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you. Thanks for coming on with us. So Jon, we have not, I don't think we've introduced our audience to Garden.io yet. So let's talk a little bit. Tell us about the company.
Yeah, sure. So we started Garden in beginning of 2018. So it's my second startup. It's a company like many others born out of frustration. So what we do, Garden is a development automation platform, and we make it easier to develop, build, and test and deploy microservices applications, and basically focusing on Kubernetes and cloud native today. That's where all the action is.
Absolutely.
And yeah, so I had been building kind of internal tooling, like many companies do. You make your own bespoke internal tooling to make the whole development and testing experience better for your application developers. And all the while, I was getting frustrated that nothing like Garden or in this general realm existed. And this is before a lot of interesting tools actually emerged in this ecosystem. But yeah, it's built in anger, let's put it that way. But yeah, made some good progress over the last 2.5 years.
Excellent. And is your background development, testing, both, or?
Well, so I'm a software engineer trying on the CEO hat for size, so I've been doing software engineering for a long time, like 15 years all in all, from like running servers in a cupboard at our office back in the day, back in Iceland when we started my previous company, observing this whole evolution of clouds. My last company was acquired by a company called Jive Software, which you may recognize.
Sure.
So I witnessed them struggle with the transition from old Java monoliths to this brave new world of microservices. And so it kind of got me thinking, maybe there's something interesting to do here.
There absolutely is. And so I've been an entrepreneur for 30 years now. Started several different, venture-backed startups. And of course, MediaOps, the company behind all of this that I do now, which was my first non-venture. Actually, the very first company I did, we didn't raise venture capital, and we sold it. And then this company, I never had to. We actually started making money before I had to raise money, which is a nice thing. But yeah, it is. But one thing I've learned in being an entrepreneur and speaking and dealing with entrepreneurs all these years is that the exact reason you cited is very much a reason why people start companies, because they see a need, they see a hole, they see there needs to be something to do here. I've never met an entrepreneur who said, it would be nice to have this, but it's not really necessary, right? Because no one wants to start a company building or selling something that's not a necessary. We all see something that says, God darn it, there needs to be something to do this. And there's got to be a better way. There's got to be an easier way, a more automated, a cheaper something. And in some small way, it's going to change the world. It's going to change the world for application developers, software engineers, testers, what have you. And so that's a really valid reason to go out and start a company. Of course, as you know, from there to here is a journey, right? Every day, you're pushing that rock up the hill. And sometimes, some days we push it a little further than other days and we feel good. And some days we don't feel so good. But nevertheless, you're right. You're in a space that is exploding. As I mentioned, I just finished a webinar before jumping on our interview today, and it was on actually Kubernetes and Cloud Native with AWS. And a stat that came up during the webinar, 70 to 75% of all new applications being deployed on AWS today on Kubernetes.
Oh, it's gotten that high, huh?
That's staggering. Now,
yeah.
But that's new applications. So I'm talking greenfield, right? Not modernization or app, shift and lift or something like that. But nevertheless, that's an unbelievable number, right? When we think about that, for something that's 5 years old. So, but by the same token, you don't see a lot of people raising their hands and saying, this Kubernetes Cloud Native things, it's a piece of cake. It's easy. No problem.
No, that's a common misunderstanding. And I think it's, I think sometimes, these big companies who are trying to push their wares, and, obviously there's a lot of companies with vested interest in getting Kubernetes adoption. I think it's misguided to say that, it's easy, it's simple. Look at how, it's not that much YAML. It's, these are the concepts you need to learn. There's a lot of nuance to it, and it is pretty low level. So I think, and that brings about these what are commonly known as like day two problems, and we're kind of in that category. So you can get it working, and it's well understood and is widely adopted, so it's a safe thing to use. But the developer experience has needed work, and it certainly needed work back in 2017 when I was using it. So that's kind of where the motivation comes from.
Yeah, and it's come away since then, but there's still obviously out there. You mentioned day two, so that's a phrase we get heard a lot here on TechStrong TV, as well as on our Container Journal site and DevOps.com. Why don't you, for people in our audience who maybe are not familiar with the term day two, Jan.
Your system up and running, you may even be in production. But then, issues start to creep up, like you start to realize it's actually a lot of boilerplate and kind of manual work involved in the developer process, the application developer, like the web developer who wants to just work on the web application, all of a sudden needs to have a lot of context and needs to understand a lot of new concepts relating to Kubernetes or whatever else it is you might be adopting. Security is also in this bracket because Kubernetes is, it's basically insecure by default. So a lot of times, like, people realize this when they're pretty deep into the process. And I think I like to focus on that side of the coin, and then there's a lot of good work that's been done on the, just getting it up and running, making sure Kubernetes runs everywhere. I'm more of an application developer by heart and nature. So I like to bridge that gap and make sure people stay productive after having gone through this, the day one, as it were.
Absolutely. So, John, I want to mention that Garden.io and you are doing a webinar with us here at Media Ops. I believe it's next week on Tuesday, which would be the 20th, right? And it's around noon. I want to say around noon, New York, East Coast time, 5 o'clock, Berlin, Central Europe time. Talk to us a little bit about the webinar.
Yeah, so one thing that's emerged, because we've been going through, we started thinking pretty broadly about the developer experience and how you test applications on Kubernetes. But what we've been gravitating towards is the additional set of problems that come about when you have very large and complex applications. Say if you have 100+ services, and you need to develop them in some cohesive way. You need them to function together. You need to be able to test end-to-end test, integration test across all these different boundaries, manage a lot of configuration. And I think, and what we found is a lot of our open source users, they have these large, complicated stacks. And we figured that that's a worthy topic in and of itself, because it's one thing to do like your Hello World application where you have like a small, maybe 5 different services, a message queue and an API server and a front end and something like that. But what when you have 100 different services, a bunch of different teams working on different components? How do you manage that complexity and not have it just get exponentially more tedious and slow to work on? And that's the general theme of the webinar. And we will be talking a bit about Garden along with other things. So it's not all about Garden. It's really what we have learned working with our customers who had these problems, developing tooling for them, developing our best practices and what we would suggest as ways to, stay productive even though we have a lot of code to cover.
Absolutely. Sometimes it gets brought home to me whenever I do webinars or I'm dealing with, large groups of people on this stuff, is that we live in sort of a tech bubble where, people are doing Kubernetes. Of course, you know what Kubernetes is, right? And we call them K8s and second day problems. Of course, we know what that is too, and what that entails. And we sometimes forget. I'm reminded this webinar I just did again. It was on Kubernetes. 53% of the people didn't have a Kubernetes deployment. They were there to just learn about Kubernetes yet, because we forget is even though 75%, yes, new applications, Kubernetes, there's still a lot of people who are maybe not at the forefront of that wave. They're behind that wave. They're looking at Kubernetes. They're dabbling Kubernetes. And the good news is because of tools like Garden, right? Tools like Garden, we've already seen people make mistakes. And what we've done with these kinds of tools is to help you from paying what I always call the idiot tax, right? Which is repeating mistakes someone else made already, right? You don't want to, in business, everyone makes mistakes. No one's perfect. But it's good if you can learn from other people's mistakes, right?
Well,
and it sounds very much. Yeah, we all have. We all have. It's part of the human condition. But, it's when you listen to what Garden and your own personal experience, there is a lot of that, right? How do I make it easier for the people coming behind us with this and so forth? So next week is the webinar. You're going to show people this. But I'm going to ask you to look into a crystal ball a little bit and say, okay, if we were doing this 6 months from now, a year from now, what kind of help is Garden to the people who are developing Kubernetes applications next year? Not this year, next year.
So I think, so are you asking once they've started using Garden, or what would I be?
No, people next year. Let's say next year there's another large chunk of the market who says, okay, I'm ready to take the dive. I'm ready to go Kubernetes, right? I'm part of that 25%, right? What does Garden help them with next year that maybe is different than what they're doing now, than what you're doing now?
I think so. One interesting thing so we started in 2018, and we've stuck to very much the same core idea. What I think you'll be able to get out of Garden a year from now that you maybe have to do a little bit more work to achieve now. We'll have a wider range of canned integration so that you don't have to connect the dots so much yourself. And I think that's what developers are, by some estimation. I've talked to a bunch of CTOs and leading up to starting a company and throughout, and I've heard people say their developers are probably wasting about 20-25% of their time solving solved problems, or just kind of waiting, doing plumbing and drudgery, waiting for slow CI pipelines. And it's this thing about solving solved problems. We want to just go further in abstracting away what is really not at all specific to your business, the way you do things. And that's what I want to see both in the ecosystem with Garden specifically, is figuring out what is the common ground and lifting that up so that people don't have to think about it anymore. My ultimate goal is for people to be able to focus on their application and what's specific to their business. And I think we will have made further strides in abstracting those, the plumbing from your everyday developer, and just make it easier to adopt. I think now people need to be quite technically proficient to use Kubernetes. I would hope for that bar to be lowered. Those 25%, they should be able to use Kubernetes without really getting into the weeds and knowing all the nasty details you have to get into currently.
Love it. Jan, we're almost out of time. I want to remind people, next Tuesday, 5 p.m., 1700 Berlin time, noon New York time. That would be 9 a.m. California time. Great webinar coming up with you and the Garden team here on DevOps.com, Container Journal. We'll be diving into these subjects. It should be a great one. In the meantime, hey man, great continued success with Garden. Keep doing what you're doing. The world needs it. And you are changing it in some little way. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you kindly. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Jan Edevald, CEO, co-founder of Garden, here on TechStrong TV. Check out their webinar. You can register for free. It'll be live next week. You can register on DevOps.com. Any of the media ops sites will get you there. But for now, that's it. This is Alan Schimmel. We'll be back with our next guest in just a moment.
SecurityBoulevard.com is the leading resource for news, analysis, and education on challenges facing the cybersecurity industry. SecurityBoulevard.com covers all aspects of cybersecurity, including data security, DevSecOps, cloud security, application security, network security, security threats, and more. SecurityBoulevard.com has the largest selection of security content, featuring breaking news, blog posts, podcasts, and more. Visit www.securityboulevard.com to learn more. SecurityBoulevard.com, home of Security Bloggers Network.
Up next is my friend Stephen Chin. You know, I used to see Stephen once a month at conferences. I haven't seen him in 8 or 9 months now. But, Stephen told us he was still doing conferences all remote like the rest of us. He did one in Johannesburg, South Africa. Anyway, Stephen, of course, is Senior Director DevRel at JFrog. JFrog had a big announcement. It was last week. They're actually releasing an entire tier of the JFrog Enterprise stack as a free service. So that's right. It's free, no credit card, no nothing, and you could use all JFrog has to offer. Of course, there are limits in what you can do in terms of size and volume, but it's a great way if you want to learn about JFrog, you want to learn about CI/CD, you want to learn about DevOps, you want to see how your organization might be able to utilize these technologies. The JFrog free stack is a great way of checking that out. And the other thing I'll tell you, you'll hear Stephen talk about it. You know, they recognize that GitHub and GitLab and CloudBees and some of these others, everyone is in that CD stack, end-to-end DevOps, as I call it, market, and as is JFrog, and they're, staking their claim to it. So here now is my interview with Stephen Chin, Senior Director DevRel at JFrog.
This is Digital Anarchist.
Hey everyone, thanks for joining us on another segment of TechStrong TV. My guest for this segment is my friend Stephen Chin. Stephen, of course, is with JFrog. Stephen, welcome, my friend. How are you?
Good, doing good. So we're all managing through the current situation. I miss seeing you in person because we don't get to meet at conferences anymore.
I miss going to conferences. We were talking offline. I even miss waiting online at the airport already. I never thought I would come to that. But
don't worry, there'll still be security lines when we get back in airplanes. I'm sure they love making us wait.
I'm sure actually, I spoke to someone who flew recently, and they said it's really funny. I mean, there's very little lines, and you pull down your mask, and then they kind of rush you on through. Yeah, it'll be interesting to see when and if. I'm supposed to go to Hawaii for Christmas, New Year's, and they're doing a thing now. You got to get tested 72 hours before you go, and then when you land, they're going to start doing a test too, so like a double test. But we'll see. We'll see what happens. How's life in COVID been treating you, though?
No, it's been good, and I think it's given us a time as well to focus on some of the things that we haven't had a chance to do, like more content, doing more engagement with DevOps and technology audiences, and just in general, working on things which we've had in the works for a while, but finally got a chance to unveil, like the new free version of our product.
We're going to talk a lot about that. Of course, the announcement for that came out on Tuesday afternoon here on the East Coast, and we're going to jump into it. But of course, there really hasn't been too much excitement or going on at JFrog over the last couple months, other than, the IPO and a bunch of other, good stuff
nothing
happening.
Terribly exciting.
No, it's been humdrum. So congratulations on that, and to all of the frogs and my friends over there. So what's the deal with the new free version, Stephen?
So, I think one of the things which Baruch and myself do a lot of is trying to educate and help folks to improve their DevOps skill set, how they can do full end-to-end, including security, CI/CD, distribution, kind of how you arrange a full end-to-end DevOps pipeline. And I think one of the challenges has always been if you want to use high-end full-featured DevOps platforms, typically those are large platforms that you have to get through your company. It's not really accessible to your average individual developer or small team. And
Yeah.
I think one of the things which we think is really important is educating folks, helping them improve their best practices, and removing as many barriers as possible to helping folks learn. So I think the new free version of our product, which we announced, is in my opinion really impactful, because as an individual developer or as like a small team which is just getting started, this gives you the ability to use a full DevOps platform without making the upfront investments in all of the technology. And the big difference about this as well is it's a cloud subscription. So you simply have to set up an account. It automatically provisions for you, and then you're up and running in your choice of either Amazon or Google or Microsoft with a full end-to-end DevOps platform.
That's great. Quite frankly, the DevOps space, cloud native space, is one where I think developers, they expect something free. They expect to get something, whether it's a trial or a rate or size limited version or an open core or something. The new model today, of course, is let me get my hands on it, right? And if I like it, I will become your champion. I will try to get the rest of our organization in here. So I think it's important to give that sort of on-ramp to organizations. But then I think, Stephen, as you pointed out, there are a lot of organizations that, right now and for the foreseeable future, they're not going to be Fortune 2000 or Global 2000. They're going to be small teams. And something like a JFrog is a godsend to them. But, there's a lot of, beyond the money of paying for the software, the setup and let's say the total cost of ownership is prohibitive for them, right? And this is a way around.
I think we meet lots of folks at conferences, and even folks who were previous customers who've switched over and they've joined newer, smaller organizations which don't currently have Artifactory or some of our products. And I think it's great for them, but it's also great for folks who want to do advanced DevOps techniques like doing security scanning, or
Sure.
building out complicated pipelines with integrations to other workflows. And typically to set all that up kind of yourself, you almost need somebody to do the installation, to do a lot of the administration. And I think with the cloud-based offerings where it's all automatically provisioned, you have an environment which is already set up and tested and tuned for exactly the situation you're in, and it's in a Kubernetes environment which can scale up and scale down. This really gives you kind of it's like it's like having your own personal DevOps team, kind of your super DevOps team running everything for you, even though you're in a smaller company.
Absolutely. And I just want to make sure we're clear to the audience on this. Of course, Artifactory itself is open source. If you want to go do, some of the open source stuff, you can do this. When we're talking about a free version, really JFrog's making sort of its enterprise suite of products. I mean, the whole enchilada, right? The whole thing, the security, the X-ray, and the pipelines, everything. There's nothing hidden back, being held back here.
The way it works is similar to what you mentioned earlier. So we're doing you start for free, no credit card, nothing. Just give us an email address for just to provision you, and then for pipelines, which is our CI/CD solution, we give you a certain number of build minutes per month. For Artifactory, we give you a certain amount of storage every month. And then we also give you access to X-Ray, which does security scanning and then tells you if any of the dependencies you pulled down have vulnerabilities in it. It even pops apart, like if you upload a Docker image or something else, it'll actually do it'll pull it apart and it'll do introspection of it to make sure that there's no vulnerable Linux packages or like modules that are hosted inside of other artifacts. And we on our plans, we actually offer more features than a lot of our competitors like GitLab, and also more build minutes and capabilities than folks. So we're trying to make it as accessible as possible to a very large audience. And I think, especially for what we care about in the developer relations team, which is educating and helping folks improve their skill set, and just in general up leveling their knowledge so that they can become grow their career and kind of become a more advanced DevOps engineer. I think this is the right tools that you need to get started on that journey.
Agreed. I got to ask about support. What about support for the free version? What do you offer?
So we have a special Stack Overflow channel set up. So folks who have questions on Artifactory, on pipelines, on X-Ray can ask questions. We try to respond to them very quickly. And of course, there's also community folks as well who chime in. And we already have a very large base of folks who are using all of our products who also chime in and give help to other users of the product.
That's fantastic. Stephen, what about the on-ramp from here, though? Okay, so I got a taste of it. I like what I'm using. We want to do more. I want to go upstream with my offering. I don't want to lose what I've already built here, right? I just want to get more minutes, more storage, better support, whatever. What does that path look like?
Yeah, so right from within the product, one click and you're on one of our paid plans. So it's very easy to upgrade if you want to continue expanding your usage of your product. And this really lets you kind of shift left and push more of the security scanning, more of those capabilities to developers in your organization. So I think something else which we see is a lot of DevOps teams who are already customers of our product. They want to get other folks in their organization to start using Artifactory, X-Ray, pipelines. And this is an easy way, even before they're ready to hop on the large corporate instance, to get teams to try it out and to start using some of the capabilities within your organization.
Excellent. Stephen, you mentioned before we were asking how things were during these months with COVID and everything. And you said, look, it's a great opportunity for people to learn, get educated, try new things. This is a perfect example, right? Where maybe you're using another DevOps solution, maybe you're not, maybe you're new to DevOps, or maybe you're just working from home and want to up your chops, right? You want to get more skills. Even if you're looking to experiment and learn, this seems like a great way to do it on little money.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So in the recent Stack Overflow survey of different careers and opportunities, SREs and DevOps engineers were actually some of the highest paid positions for technical folks. So if you're not already upping your game on DevOps, this is the time to do it, right? I mean, we all have quite a lot of free time now.
Absolutely. Well, some people are working more than they ever were before, right? Because they don't know how to put the off button on, but it's all good. I mean, but you're right. We spun up something here called Recruit Ops about a month or 2 months ago now. And it only it's recruiting, but only sort of in DevOps, cloud native, cyber type of jobs and cloud transformation. And yeah, it's crazy. Even people talk about the economy and everything else. You can't find people with those skill sets still, or not enough of them.
Yeah, no. I mean, we've been looking for folks who have a mix of like cloud native and DevOps and programming skill sets, and it's hard to hire for. And those individuals are some of the most talented folks. Like if you have that wide set of experience, then you're very desirable. So that's great that you guys are helping.
Hard to hire and harder to keep.
Well.
Yeah, well, it was kind of a natural thing because we kind of sit in the middle between all these people who come here for DevOps and related information, and all these companies who are looking to fill those hard to find, hard to fill roles. So, yeah, something else to keep us busy here when we're not doing these interviews. Stephen, the announcement was Tuesday. It's available on the JFrog site now?
Yep. So just go to jfrog.com. There's a link to get started with the free tier. And it's super easy to set up. Just, give us your name and email and you're off and running.
No credit cards, nothing. Just name and email. Fantastic. What else is happening? You, as you mentioned, you and Baruch do a lot of the developer relations. What do you, of course you're not traveling like you were before, either who is, but what are you seeing out there, Stephen?
Well, you say I'm not traveling, but I was speaking in Johannesburg just last week.
Really?
So I think at the Johannesburg user group. So I think one of the things about the current environment is, we used to have to get on planes and then have to travel and then speak at a conference. So there are only so many places you could be at once. Now we can literally be at 3 conferences in the same day.
Yeah, that's true
time
too.
Zone. So I said we have more free time, but I think some of us who, especially the workaholics in us, have quite a lot less time now.
I think one of the lessons of COVID is you got to find your on-off button when it comes to work stuff, because otherwise it'll eat you up and it's not sustainable. So,
exactly.
But on the other hand, doing work is work. Doing things to make yourself more valuable, better, more desirable in the job market, learning new things is something that'll help you with work, but it really helps you as an individual as well. And, whether it's learning how to use JFrog DevOps or, making furniture in your garage, it kind of it's skills that kind of help you. Anyway, all good stuff. Stephen, thanks for joining us here on TechStrong TV. Anything else we missed with the free tiers that people may want to know?
No, I think it's what we talked about. So you can easily sign up for it. It offers security scanning. It offers pipelines, and of course, the best binary management in the industry. And I think it's a great tool for
the Go repo and some.
Yeah.
Of the
So the nice thing about this is it supports all 26 plus different artifact types. So it's not limited to just Java or Go or C and C++. This is the full enchilada.
So it truly is the whole thing. That's great, man. Cool stuff. Stephen, it's nice seeing you, if just on Zoom. I hope it won't be much longer until we can be out in person again at conferences.
Well, we have some interesting plans for Swamp Up, so I'll be in touch, and that might be a chance to connect in person.
I hope so. I feel like, we will. All righty. Stephen Chin, JFrog. You want to check out what JFrog and DevOps are about? Go check out this new free tier of services. It's complete, a complete tier service or service tier of the entire JFrog Enterprise Suite. So good stuff. Thanks, Stephen. Say hello to all the frogs for us. Keep up the great work, and we'll see you soon.
Thanks, Alan.
Thank you. Hey, this is Alan Schimmel. This is TechStrong TV. We're going to be right back with another guest.
ContainerJournal.com is the leading online destination for centralized computing-related content. ContainerJournal.com covers all aspects of software containers, from container management, data management for containers, container security, networking for containers, to the entire container ecosystem, Kubernetes, microservices, serverless, and more. ContainerJournal.com has the largest selection of container-related news, featuring breaking news, blog posts, podcasts, and more. Visit www.containerjournal.com to learn more. ContainerJournal.com is operated by MediaOps Inc., the team behind DevOps.com, Digital Anarchist, SecurityBoulevard.com, DevOps Connect, and DevOpsDozen.com.
Okay, as I mentioned at the top of the show, I was really excited about a panel that we have today. We don't do a lot of panels on TechStrong TV other than our like CISO Talk and DevOps Unbound show. But this was a panel that really just kind of sprang up organically one morning as a result of conversations I was having with Droidio and Isaac Mascara, CEO and CEO of Armory. And of course, Armory, the people who are bringing Spinnaker to the enterprise in a commercial manner. We were able to grab Kelsey Hightower, who needs no introduction, from Google. Andy Glover from Netflix joined us. And we had a really great conversation around Spinnaker, how it's evolved, around the enterprise needs for CI/CD today and automating software delivery, what's driving it. And it was a really great conversation. We had some good references. I think you'll enjoy. More than that, this now, as a result of it anyway, what you're seeing today is a preview of a larger panel we're going to be holding with some more folks, including the four that were here today, for our DevOps Experience event on October 22nd. So if you love this panel, you're going to love the DevOps Experience one. Anyway, here now is Kelsey Hightower, Andy Glover, Isaac Mascara, and Droidio, and myself on Spinnaker, Armory, and CI/CD.
This is Digital Anarchist.
Hey everyone, it's Alan Schimmel, TechStrong TV. I've got a really great panel here that I wanted to present to you all today. And it really is kind of a state of Spinnaker show where we're going to talk about, one of the hottest kind of choices in the CI/CD world right today is Spinnaker. It's part of CDF. And then there's also a Spinnaker Summit coming up that we're going to tell you more about. But first, let me introduce you to this all-star lineup I've got of people to talk to us first. I'm going to start. I'm looking at this in a Brady Bunch Zoom screen. Of course, you're not at home. But up on top, I've got my friend Droidio. Droidio, why don't you introduce yourself, your company, and we'll take it from there.
Sure. Hi, this is Droidio. I'm the CEO of Armory. And Armory is a company that is commercializing Spinnaker. So we'll be happy to chat a bit more about what we are seeing from some of our customers, which are large companies that are digitally transforming and using Armory and Spinnaker to do so. Excellent.
Coming down from Droidio, we're going to go to Isaac. Isaac, introduce yourself.
How's it going? My name is Isaac Mascara. I am the CTO and co-founder here with Droidio at Armory. I'm also part of the steering committee with Andy Glover and also represent Spinnaker on the Continuous Delivery Foundation.
Excellent. Welcome. Andy?
Hi, I'm Andy Glover. I run productivity engineering at Netflix. Previous to that, I ran delivery engineering, which is the team that built Spinnaker. I am on the steering committee with Isaac, as he mentioned, and I was part of the CDF when it got started.
Excellent. And running the anchor lap, we've got Kelsey. He may not need an introduction to most of you, but go ahead, Kels.
Hey, so I'm a self-proclaimed minimalist in all facets of life and work at Google Cloud as a technologist, kind of working across the stack from compute to culture and things like CI/CD.
Fantastic. Kelsey, welcome. So you know what, Spinnaker, our audience is all about DevOps and cloud native. They've heard of Spinnaker. The rap has been, it's great for really, really big companies maybe, but it's really hard like everything else. And, what kind of pickup is it having? A lot of people, look, the Armory team has done an amazing job of evangelizing Spinnaker. Sometimes I even think at the expense of the Armory brand itself, right? But they've done an amazing job. Kels, Andy, you, of course, have all, evangelized around Spinnaker. But let's have a real conversation with our audience. Where are we today in Spinnaker? What's good? What's bad? What's really getting better? What should people be looking at? Who wants to go first?
I'll jump in.
Go ahead,
it reminds me a bit when Kubernetes came out. Kubernetes was seen as like, it's so big. Why is it so big? Why is it so complex? And the problem tools like Kubernetes for this container orchestrator that is trying to solve people that are now thinking about running compute across multiple zones and regions, and not just 12-factor web apps that would work well on like a simple platform as a service. We're talking about machine learning workloads. We're talking about your existing workloads, even if you've written them 10 or 15 years ago. So when we think about Spinnaker and why is it as easy as some of those kind of like push button or just give me your source code and it does CI/CD, I think most people, and I talked about this in the past, most companies of any large size, and this could be a 50-person startup, once you start to have something super complex, I've always thought the real goal of CI/CD was to serialize your culture. So whatever your engineering team does, whatever your security practices are, whether you check things before they go out, or you have some way of canary slowly rolling out changes, then you're probably going to need a more complex tool to allow you to describe that level of sophistication.
Fair enough. Anybody?
I think one of the things that I would just mention. Oh, go ahead, Andy.
No, go ahead. No, Grady, you go ahead.
Okay. Well, just to set some context on what we're seeing from our customers. So these are some of the world's largest companies, like a JP Morgan Chase, let's say. We are entering into this era of big code where source code is becoming the DNA of the company. And we are seeing monoliths being split into hundreds or thousands of microservices. We're seeing orders of magnitude more developers that are shipping that code out to, instead of one target, out to multiple targets. And there's just this level of complexity, like Kelsey is talking about, that these companies start to encounter as they become more sophisticated about thriving in this era of big code. And I think if you fast forward 5 or 10 years, it's very likely that the Global 2000 enterprises are going to need to look a lot more like a Netflix looks today, where that kind of sophistication it requires a sophisticated platform that allows a lot of different teams across the company to work in asynchronous ways that allow dev and sec and ops and product owners and even executives to understand, like Kelsey says, like serializing this culture, platforming it in a way that it's not all being done through Excel spreadsheets and emailing binaries. Like the old way of delivering software to a data center, it doesn't scale for this new cloud native world. And it used to be the case that every company had to build their own path to production because every data center looks different. There could be no platform. But that's not the case anymore. Now there can be a platform. And so the reason that we're so excited about Spinnaker is that it has the support of the infrastructure layer, of the infrastructure vendors that are doing all the innovating, right? There's this like dumpster fire of innovation that's happening with these Global 2000 companies can't leverage if they don't leverage some kind of a modern platform like Spinnaker in order to be able to, get tens of thousands of devs out to production in consistent ways with safety and velocity, where they don't have to pick one or the other. So I think just setting the stage around, why is there a need for something like Spinnaker? It's this big migration out of data centers and into the cloud and just the huge complexities that come from it. And, Netflix and Google were leaders in this space and open sourced Spinnaker in the first place because they wanted to share it with the world. And that's just an incredible thing for a company like us to try to bring into these Global 2000 enterprises.
Anybody else want to comment on that one?
Yeah, just to kind of build on what Kelsey and Drodio said here, which is, interestingly enough, I think deployments aren't really the problem in the sense that if you look at deployments in a silo themselves, it's actually pretty simple. Like getting your code into Kubernetes itself isn't that difficult, or getting your code onto a machine itself isn't that difficult. But as Drodio mentioned, things around doing it safely, including security, compliance, the culture part, learning how to do it in a way that is repeatable and auditable with transparency, that is the hard part. And what ends up happening, again, as these cloud vendors themselves are pouring billions of dollars into innovations, coming up with new targets, every single time that there's a new target, and we define target as where code or configuration ends up as a result of a delivery process. That could be databases, that could be your ML pipeline, could be, you could create pipelines for, processing videos or movies, such as Netflix does. And every time there's a new target, we have to reinvent all of the compliance and the security stuff over again. And I think what Spinnaker allows you to do, and why it's a little bit harder to get started but does end up trying to address the harder, complex problem, is to reuse a lot of the compliance security pieces that allow teams to collaborate together. And as Kelsey mentioned, allow you to really serialize your culture and iterate on your culture as your culture adapts, as your processes adapt. That's the hard part, but the deployment part that everybody thinks about as CI/CD isn't really that difficult. We're solving a problem that expands outside of the deployment scope. And when we do these exercises with the Fortune 500, where we go, tell us how you get code into production, what you quickly realize is that deployments is one step out of probably 50, right? And we end up having to re-engineer 49 steps because we have a new deployment target. And now with Spinnaker here in the world, we don't have to do that. So that's like the main value that I see.
I think you raise a great point, Isaac, in that it's far more than just deployment. In fact, it's about delivery. And for me, the light bulb went off years ago when an engineer came to my team and said, we want to run essentially feature flags through Spinnaker. And I at first pushed back because I was like, oh my gosh, like, why would you do that? It just seems ridiculous. Of course, he was persistent, and I came around to realizing that it was all about the delivery of those feature flags, and that he was looking for a process by which he could basically validate that a feature flag was not breaking, let's say, production or breaking a particular region. And the value was that we could plug it right into Spinnaker, and he got, or the company in truth, got all this validation for quote unquote free.
Excellent. Let me play devil's advocate for a second. So Kelsey, when I hear you talking about serializing this, right, I'm thrown back to when, over the years with DevOps, and we look at the Spotify squad model, right, where it kind of laid out sort of a serial approach to building out your DevOps at an enterprise scale versus just, teams, 12 people on a team, boom, 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 boom. For some organizations, that worked okay. For other organizations, it didn't work so good. And it wound up being really, really modified over the years, right, to how do you bring out, a DevOps sort of culture, if you will, across the thing, across a large enterprise. So can we really serialize Spinnaker to bring it out across these enterprises?
So remember what we mean by serialized. We're not necessarily talking like the factory serialized where there's this one pipeline, right? A lot of companies in their brains we're going to create a golden pipeline or a golden pipeline template that everyone's going to use. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying every company in the world has a V1 of how they deliver software. Some people understand what that V1 is. Some people have made that V1 intentionally, and some people have it by happenstance. Whatever that is, meaning if you need 150 different pipelines, it is what it is. What we want to do is serialize that so we can see clearly. So if one particular delivery method requires 50 checks and balances and then run this script or that script, the goal to me typically, and how I did it in the past, was you need to be able to capture whatever that is. And ideally, when you put it into a tool, AKA the serialization process, that's when we decide that, hey, this is where we are, this is the reality. Let's just get it in a tool so we can at least do that repeatably and reliably. And then we can look at it and say, those 50 steps should be 25. Then you go and change it for that particular pipeline, even if the other ones stay the same. So it's a way of capturing learning, but not one way of saying this is how everyone does everything.
Fair. Good.
Hey, Alan, just one other quick thing to mention based on what Kelsey is saying. One of the things that I think is so incredible about Spinnaker is how you get best practices out of the box. So let's just take those pipelines that, typically, like you're saying, Kelsey, like companies oftentimes don't even understand what they are today, or at least not everyone in the company has visibility into what those are. And they're very often homegrown. So, you can only improve what you can measure, right? So let's get them in a platform where you can start to understand what they are and where those blockers are. But then the magic of Spinnaker is like you can literally, with a drop down, have access to canary deployments. And that canary deployment system isn't something that one of your teams made in a different way than the other team made. That literally just grabbing it from a dropdown and putting a canary stage into your pipeline is a canary system that is the best practice from some of the companies that are deploying code to production with the highest velocity of any companies, like a Netflix or a Google. And so you get out of the box this best practice value that you just don't have when you're building it yourself in a different way than everybody else. And that's just such a big deal.
I want to add one thing there, because I know a lot of people hear canary and say our team, our company is not like Netflix. It's not like Google. Therefore, we're too far away to even consider this. I would say one of the most powerful features for Spinnaker that I remember using was this whole like wait and validate. And people's like, no, everything should just be fully automated. When you kick over the domino, we want to see the whole Rugo machine go off. And that's not quite true for most companies. When I worked in like finance, we would always be able to like automate the first part, but then we would have to literally wait until someone drove to a gas station, used a credit card at the gas pump to make sure that transaction went all the way through the system before it was good. And that required, unfortunately, a human to do something. But something like Spinnaker gives you the ability to just own that part. Like here, we're literally waiting for that to happen. And over time, you can look at how long you're waiting. Maybe you can discuss as a team how to make this wait window go away. But if that's where you're at, you can actually explicitly put that wait in there. And then once it's done, approve it, and then kick off the rest of the automation if you have it.
One awesome thing about what you're saying, Kelsey, it reminds me of a customer story. So we've got like a Fortune 100 technology company, and maybe Isaac, you can tell the story, because that process of enabling those human needs, right? Like literally in this example, there was a VP that needed to approve deployments before it went out, because it's the VP's job that's on the line. Like the VP doesn't want to get fired if they deliver a bug to prod. And so the VP felt like they needed to have that wait stage. But then maybe Isaac, you can talk a little bit about that maturity process. Kelsey, you talked about like taking out, half of the steps as the company starts to be able to iterate on it. There's just such a great story there.
Yeah, I mean, I think, talking about that story and the way that you integrate, I think what Kelsey was saying with what was happening at this organization was that no one's going to feel very comfortable just going straight into being Netflix. Like it's just too scary to go like we're just too far away. And I think the way we advise organizations to work is to like, fine, continue doing what you're doing. Let's add a parallel path where we can start adding automation or start adding these safety checks. And then over time, when you feel comfortable, you'll realize that you don't actually need that manual approval, right? But we don't have to get there today. Let's just iterate on our culture, iterate on our processes, right? Nobody goes from, like when you start working out at the gym, right? You don't start like on day one bench pressing, 400 pounds. You got to get there. And that takes a lot of work and exercise and effort. And so this is what we tell our organizations to do. Like, let's just, even if it's manual, right? In fact, actually, that's what we do. Tell me all of the manual steps you have to do. Let's just model it. And you'll see that we have a lot of like just manual steps, not just from the VP, as Drodio mentioned, but like other human beings as well. Like a human being needs to sign off on things, especially product just needs to check off on things. And we'll model those inside of Spinnaker, what we call manual judgment stages, to include that human interaction. And then over a period of time, we start figuring out how we can start really pulling out those stages and making them more automated. And we've seen increases in number of deployments per month for these organizations to go up 10x and sometimes even 100x in terms of number of deployments. So the productivity goes through the roof. But the very first step, really, getting back to Kelsey's point of serializing the culture, you can't improve it. You can't iterate if you don't know what it looks like. If that culture is in Isaac's head or Kelsey's head or Drodio's head, we're not going to be able to iterate because I don't know. Maybe Drodio left for a couple of weeks to go on vacation. Now what do we do, right? And so many organizations run their software delivery practices from people's heads. And when those people leave, a lot of bad stuff happens. In fact, actually, Drodio and Ben and I were in an organization in which one person left and we could no longer deploy the website or upgrade the database. We had to get that person back. And so that's how dangerous and risky it is in some of these organizations. But as soon as you get it out on paper, you're kind of like halfway there. And then there's huge benefits to it, just slowly iterating and using the safety mechanisms inside of Spinnaker to really help you gain velocity and safety.
I think also when you serialize, onto a platform, a culture, and I guess the learnings that other teams are, actively experiencing, you get an increase in innovation. And so we've seen this at Netflix. Canary itself has gone through a number of innovations or iterations since we essentially standardized it into Spinnaker, and we democratized, let's say, canarying. Everyone could get it for free. And as more and more people started using it, we started learning new lessons and evolved that platform. Even deployment patterns have evolved since moving to Spinnaker. The state of the art, pre-Spinnaker was, blue-green deploys. And now we're doing ASDs, which are automated safe deploys, which are a rolling blue-green with metric checks interspersed as a cluster grows. And so these innovations are extracted from having a serialized DevOps culture on a standard platform. And ultimately, it's, Netflix is increasing its productivity and efficiency, so to speak, at an increasing rate because we have this standard platform where we can all take advantage of these innovations.
Excellent. So guys, let's get real, right? Spinnaker is one of several alternatives that are open to organizations that are looking to get with the transformation, right? To move to cloud, to accelerate their businesses. And you want to know the truth? None of them are easy, because these are complex, as we spoke about off camera. These are complex problems. And, as a culture, we have a defect that we look for simple answers to complex problems. So if you're looking for a magic button or a magic bullet, that doesn't exist. But what, in your mind, Andy, Kelsey, Isaac, Georgia, what are the clear sort of street markers or road markers to say, this is a good use case for Spinnaker. This is one where I think Spinnaker is the best choice for what we want to accomplish here.
I'm going to start that. I've been able to do this kind of thing with just some bash scripts, right? I've worked with almost every CI/CD system you can name, and you typically can get the job done. And I think going back to like this kind of Kubernetes kind of analogy here, you totally could probably use some other tool. But I think it's the fact that the industry is starting to collaborate around kind of one architecture. And since Spinnaker is kind of open from top to bottom, you start to be able to have these extensions show up, right? And I think Netflix is a great example of saying, as you learn, those plugins need to evolve to match those learnings. But guess what? All of those kind of leave this breadcrumb trail of learning along the way. So whether it's a company like Armory that steps up and says, we're going to provide commercial support, or teams like Netflix who are really just participating kind of in the open nature of saying, here's what we're learning, how we're learning, and oh, guess what? You can reuse some of this stuff as well. I think that's the number one benefit that Spinnaker has for it. And again, I've given feedback to some of the people who work on Spinnaker that they really need to enable more people to share their learnings by kind of thinking a little bit outside of the Java ecosystem. I think today you got to write plugins in Java. But if you start to open up that domain a little bit and you start to have extensions from everyone that's actually using Spinnaker today, that will be the number one thing I think that would accelerate Spinnaker's greatest strength, which is learning and serializing those results. And if you do that in a pluggable way, people will just get there faster going forward.
Yeah, I think, Alan, the question I feel like is almost like a false premise, because I think what I observe in the field is actually not a choosing between these technologies, but in fact a orchestration between them. So for example, it's not a Jenkins versus Spinnaker, and Andy, you can attest to this. It's a Spinnaker and Jenkins story. It's not a Spinnaker versus Argo story. In fact, I talked to a prospect this morning who was using Argo and started to reach certain level of complexity with their pipelines and release orchestration and release promotion that they wanted to use Spinnaker for, but still use Argo for the Kubernetes deployment. And what we see really is actually just a combination of tooling. And Kelsey, to your point, one of the things that the community is going to focus on this year has been, up until this point, has really been trying to figure out how to extend Spinnaker, but in a much more, in a bigger way, allowing for plugins. There's still work to be done. For example, we do need to figure out how to get this to be beyond Java, so that we can build a really rich ecosystem. We actually have a rich ecosystem already. It's just how do we get it even bigger? Because if anybody has ever seen the CNCF tools landscape, it's kind of like just kind of this huge sprawling logo vomit. But the reality is that the world, somebody is using each and every single one of those tools, and the problem for them, we can't just go in there and say like, well, guess what? You can't use this tool because it doesn't integrate with your CI/CD system. That's not going to work. And so we do have to kind of build an ecosystem that does integrate with the majority of those tools in that landscape, that allows organizations to choose what they need to choose for their organizations, and then continue to be able to serialize their culture in that way. And so Andy and I have been working through kind of prioritizing what our strategy is for Spinnaker, and having a rich ecosystem of vendors that go beyond just Google, Armory, AWS, and Azure and start including more of the DevOps vendors themselves, like Atlassian and Sneak and others, is going to be a huge priority for us. And I think what you'll see from the Spinnaker community in the years is a lot of growth from different contributors, and a lot of different plugins from different contributors as well, as they see these large enterprises using Spinnaker and needing to integrate into these other tools that they're already using.
Fair. I will tell you. Go ahead, Andy.
Hey, Alan. Yeah, so I'd actually flip the question a bit, because one question, the one that we're asking ourselves now, is what can we do to better meet the world where it is today? But the other question is, what is the world going to look like in some number of years? And what are the first principles and just the unstoppable trends that at least we believe to be true? And when we've taken this train of thought to its conclusion, where we've arrived is that software is the highest leverage way, literally, to improve humanity. And we are just entering a steep part of the curve where the enterprises that understand how to leverage software are going to unlock literally orders of magnitude more enterprise value than those that don't. I mean, just look at the $1 trillion club. They're all technology companies. Look at companies that are leveraging software effectively today that have PE ratios that are, 10 to 100 times higher than their industry averages. So we believe it's just unquestionably true that the global 2000 enterprises that really understand, and specifically the executive suites that understand that delivering software with both safety and velocity is a CEO level issue. And literally, you are seeing CEOs start to step down from companies. A large German auto manufacturer CEO stepped down because he said, I can't lead this company in this new digital era of massive change. And so what we believe the world is going to look like in 3, 5, 10 years is companies leaving data centers because they're forced to, because they cannot innovate quickly in a data center, because every data center is different. They're all snowflakes. Moving into the cloud where all the innovation's happening, being able to leverage all of the cloud targets that are enabling that innovation. And there will need to be some platform that can keep up with that underlying innovation that's happening at the infrastructure layer. And that platform needs to have the support of the cloud vendors themselves to keep up. And Spinnaker is literally the only thing out there that checks all those boxes. So the reason that we, as Armory, believe deeply in Spinnaker is because we just don't see any other way that the world is going to be able to exist inside of 5 years, where companies look a lot more like Netflix does now, without something like Spinnaker being the de facto standard for multi-cloud native software delivery. So we just, we think about it that way, right? What is the world going to look like within a couple of years, and what's the platform going to have to be that's going to enable that? Even if it feels a little complex today.
I have a comment, but I'll throw it out to you guys first.
I don't know if I could say it any better. That was pretty motivating.
Okay. So let me just turn it around on you, though. So you're saying Spinnaker What if I'm not a Fortune 2000 company? I'm a manufacturing company in Indiana or Wisconsin or wherever, right? I'm not in Silicon Valley. I'm not in Tel Aviv or one of these tech centers, right? But I need to digitize. And you know what? My model for the next 5 years is hybrid. I'm going to Kubernetes. I'm going to run some Kubernetes bare metal. You know, IBM is cleaving their company into two here, right? And everything that they're going on. Is Spinnaker still a choice for me? Because I really don't want to be Netflix, right? With all due respect to Netflix, I'm a huge customer, but I don't want to be Netflix. And I'm not a Fortune 2000. Is Spinnaker a choice for me?
You may not want to be Netflix or Google, but if you don't embrace kind of the ethos of the Googles and the Netflixes of the world, you will be beaten by someone else. So,
I think Isaac, it might actually be interesting to talk about a very, very large retailer that is running a Kubernetes cluster in every store and is using Spinnaker to enable that exact kind of use case that you're talking about, Alan, where
so that's exactly what I'm looking for. Tell us.
Okay, all right. Isaac, do you want to talk about that? And I don't know, Kelsey, if
so before we go there, so before we go there, like I want to get like maybe to your point. The number of large retailers that will run Kubernetes in the store is going to be drastically small. Let's just be very super honest here. Mm-hmm. We're at the level today in 2020 for a lot of these big transitions, there's nothing you can buy. So if you want a fully automated grocery store, no one's going to sell you one because there's very few people doing the R&D today that is trying to figure it out for themselves. So where we are for the next 10 years is still, you have to build it if you want to experiment with that now. Or you can wait 10, 15, 20 years until you can buy it from someone, right? So we're just kind of in this transitionary period because all this technology will come and go, period. Or it will evolve into something else that can handle the new thing. So I think the real point here is that if you want to go faster than the thing that you can buy, because once you can buy it from someone, then it's a commodity. Then that's what everybody is doing that can afford it. So that's not going to be very special. I think we always use innovation too loosely, like, oh, we're doing CI/CD, so it's innovative. That's not innovation. That's called using CI/CD. People have been doing that for a very long time. I think the innovation comes from if you're a company that is forced to push the boundaries because your particular vertical, your particular industry isn't quite there yet, then the ways you go about pushing boundaries today tend to have a lot to do with software, right? Hardware gets you so far. And then I think what we're really saying is that when I walk into the store, I want an experience. When I fly on a plane, I don't want just to have a flight with no entertainment system, no clean booking and change process. All of that comes through experiences. So I think what we're really saying here is if you're a small or large company, everyone's going to expect an experience. If I want to go to a local cupcake shop, they better have an online ordering portal. And that order needs to be there when I get there. And if I want, you should be able to integrate with DoorDash and I can order it from my phone. That's just kind of where we are. So if you're in that situation, you're probably for the next 10, 20 years are going to probably have to do a little bit of true innovation. And once you do, something like Spinnaker is going to be required to capture it and make sure that it's sustainable.
Excellent. Amen. But I'm still going to let you talk about your retail example. Isaac, go ahead.
I don't know if I can beat out Kelsey.
Kelsey
here.
made a powerful point.
He did. That was good.
I genuinely don't know if I have anything else to add. I mean, I think that's exactly what's going to happen. I think that it's all about experiences, and a lot of it is going to be centered around how software drives those experiences. And then another thing that Andy said is like, hey, you can choose not to do it. Like if you really get at its essence, and I remember when Andy, when Drodio and I and Ben first started Armory, I remember the presentations you had, and the core of Spinnaker is all about being fast and velocity and being able to iterate and the customer experience, right? You know, Netflix didn't become Netflix really because they cared about CI/CD. They cared about it because they wanted to move fast. They had this core philosophy of being able to move fast. So, you know, to be honest, it doesn't matter whether you use Spinnaker or not. You don't have to use Spinnaker. You just have to have that core philosophy of moving fast, being able to, gather feedback from your customers, and then finding the tool that does that for you. Now, of course, I'm going to tell you that Spinnaker is the best tool to do that. If you want to build it yourself, you can go ahead and build it yourself and take time to do that. I don't know if that's necessarily going fast, but these are the decisions that you as that smaller company in the Midwest or that manufacturing, you're going to have to make, right? You're going to have to figure out what is your core philosophy. And I think when people look at Netflix, I think they think of the technology, and that's just not what I think about. And I think, Andy, you've shaped the way that I think about Netflix, that I don't think about that. I think about autonomy. I think about velocity. I think about self-responsibility in the engineering group. I think much more about the cultural aspects, and what came out of that is great technology, but it wasn't the other way around. And so I think if you were to go to any company and go, do you want to be like Netflix? So they'll be like, well, I don't want to be like Netflix, because they use Titus and they use Spinnaker. That's not what being Netflix is to me. Being Netflix is like, do you care about moving fast? Do you care about your customers? Do you care about driving a great experience for those customers? Do you care about reliability and predictability? That's what being Netflix is. And I would argue this, and it would be shocking for me if any company said, I don't want any of those things.
I want to, if I can interject one clarification here. We always say move fast. I think most companies, it's not about moving fast. Can you move at all? Most companies are legitimately paralyzed. They're literally stuck and doing the same thing over and over, almost Groundhog Day. And they're just hoping there are no disruptions, like a attack from unwanted entity, a security vulnerability, or something blows up. They're in like this stale waiting pattern. So we're saying here is you probably need to just be able to move. That's it. So as long as you're moving forward in some pace, yes, these tools can probably help you move faster. But I think goal number one for most organizations is just the ability to move.
Fast is relative.
Yeah.
No,
exactly.
I mean, fast for you is probably fast. This whole COVID thing has been a perfect example of it, right? You had companies that were so stuck in their ways. They weren't worried about going to the cloud. They weren't worried about electronic delivery. They weren't worried about integrating into the DoorDashes and whatever of the world, of the whole logistics thing like that. Those are some of the, whatever it is, percentage of companies that are going out of business right now. And so I think my mic might have died, but it's a problem, right? Now, there are other companies that have just accelerated the heck out of this. Some companies got it and some companies don't. You don't, the old saying, right? You don't have to be the fastest guy running away from the bear. You just got to be faster than the guy next to you who's running from the bear, right? And so that's what it's about. Anyway, hey, man, we're about out of time, but I wanted to take the last 3 minutes. A couple of things. Number one, we're going to try to do an expanded version of this for a session coming up. But the Spinnaker Summit's coming up. I think it starts October 9th, and it's not a 1-day or a 2-day. It's a month-long celebration of Spinnaker. Drodio, do your cheerleading thing, man. What about Spinnaker Summit?
I would be happy to do that. It starts October 19th, so it's in 10 days. And actually, before I talk about the Spinnaker Summit, let me talk about Spinnaker Live, which is an event that happened earlier this year. And we've talked a lot about some of these themes. I think a really great way for somebody who's thinking about a technology like Spinnaker is to actually hear the stories from other companies that are on that journey today. And the Spinnaker Live event is just such a fantastic opportunity to do that. You can go to spinnaker.live and you can see, actually, Kelsey did a talk, Andy, but also there were talks by Pinterest. Dave Farley talked, and just companies like Pure Storage and Splunk and Sumo Logic and JP Morgan Chase and Autodesk that are sharing their stories. So, don't hear it from us, hear it from your peers that are on this journey. There's a lot of just incredible content that's out there from that event. And then upcoming is the Spinnaker Summit. So spinnakersummit.com. It's actually, we're trying something new. This is a virtual summit that is almost a month long. So it runs from October 19th to November 12th. And again, there's going to be opportunities to not just learn from others, but to actually try doing this in a hands-on way. There's a new plugin framework that's been open source. We're going to be doing a lot of just hack style events so that you can actually try innovating on this platform, bring it into your own company, getting a lot of support from the community that's there. So really hope to see a bunch of new people there. We are all a friendly bunch, so we'd love to share our learnings with you, to learn from you, to talk to you. This is a really nice opportunity to do that. So again, spinnakersummit.com. And if you want the old content, go to spinnaker.live.
Very cool stuff. Kelsey, a pleasure seeing you. I'm glad to see you well and safe. Thank you for joining us. Andy, a pleasure having you on right from your garage office.
Thanks for having
the
me.
quintessential garage. Isaac, Drodio, a pleasure. Good luck with Armory. We'll see you all at Spinnaker Summit. And like I said, we're going to try to recreate this with a few more friends. And we'll dig a little deeper.
That'll be fun. It's
all righty. Hey, this is Alan Schimmel for TechStrong TV. Wow, that was a great panel. I hope you guys enjoyed it. Next up, we're going to turn things over to our managing editor, Charlene O'Hanlon. And Charlene will have news headlines around the community sites on MediaOps, which is DevOps.com, Security Boulevard, Container Journal. And then Charlene has a good interview with James Carter of Logarithm about their recent report on the state of security, or the state of security team, rather. Are executives the problem? She'll also have a great webinar preview of our upcoming webinars here on the MediaOps channels, and there's some good ones coming up I highly recommend. So now let's turn things over to Charlene O'Hanlon, our managing editor.
Hey everybody, welcome to Thursday. This is Charlene O'Hanlon, managing editor at MediaOps, and I'm here now with the Thursday headlines for you. On DevOps.com, we have an article that looks at the different cloud orchestration technologies and their respective languages, from Kubernetes to Terraform, Ansible to Chef, and more. It's an interesting breakdown of everything you need to know from a language perspective when you're deciding which orchestration tool to use. And it really focuses not only on the features of each language, but also the benefits and drawbacks. Also on DevOps.com, we have an article that discusses the value of AI ops in cloud migrations. The process of migrating data and processes to the cloud can be a challenge, but AI ops helps identify and resolve issues before they disrupt the migration, arming technologists with the insights and providing visibility within multi-cloud and containerized environments to better manage their complex platforms. It turns out AI ops is helpful at all phases of the cloud migration process, from pre to post. We also have plenty of news, including JFrog's latest moves to expand its footprint and its customer base by making a free tier of its namesake DevOps platform available on all 3 major public cloud service providers. A free subscription to JFrog platform running on AWS, Microsoft Azure, and GCP is now generally available across 18 cloud regions. DevOps teams are provided with up to 2 gigabits of storage, 10 gigabits, or is it gigabytes? 2 gigabytes of storage, 10 gigabytes of monthly data transfer, and 2,000 CI/CD pipeline minutes per month, free of charge. The subscription spans JFrog Artifactory, integrated software package management tool for binaries and container registry, JFrog X-ray vulnerability scanning tool, and JFrog Pipeline CI/CD platform. JFrog recently went public and is looking for ways to expand its current customer base of 5,800. So by offering free access to the tooling in the cloud, the company hopes that those new customers will eventually shift to a paid tier as their projects expand. Over on Container Journal, we have a piece on data orchestration and the challenges it presents to developers. As more developers use Kubernetes, they run into issues when working with persistent data at scale. And while many storage vendors claim to have a solution, many times they don't address the issue effectively. But this is not a storage problem, apparently. This is a data problem. To solve it, we need to use the same model that Kubernetes uses to free applications from compute infrastructure. In short, data needs to be untethered from storage infrastructure. Intrigued? Check out the article to learn more about this new way of solving the data orchestration issue. We also have an look at how eBPF monitoring can help developers better understand the performance of their containers to see which ones are behaving badly. eBPF is also known as Extended Berkeley Packet Filter, and it's a Linux kernel technology that was developed in 1992 at Lawrence Berkeley National Laboratory as a rule-based mechanism to filter and capture network packets. Fast forward to today, and the technology is proving useful in monitoring containers. With eBPF, kernel events can be correlated with network flow data to pinpoint which users, processes, and containers are showing abnormal behavior. This article discusses how organizations can use eBPF as well as the tools available to perform eBPF monitoring and analysis. Over on Security Boulevard, we take a look at the very real issue of pandemic burnout. I'm sure you've all felt it. I know that I have. And as we slog through the months of quarantine and work from home, it seems to be getting worse. Symptoms of pandemic burnout are very similar to those of regular job burnout: extreme fatigue, lack of satisfaction with the job, apathy, anxiety, depression, decreased concentration, and lowered productivity. And like regular job burnout, can be a very real security threat to your organization. When employees burn out, they mentally check out, which means they're not paying attention or they're not following security protocols as closely. That can open the door for a data breach or malicious activity on the network. So this article offers some tips on how to spot pandemic burnout and how organizations can help reduce the stress associated with working from home and keep employees from burning out. Speaking of the pandemic, we also have an article that looks at the need for a different and better security paradigm for the new way of working, whether it's in the office, working at home, or both. The same safety security nets that employees had in the office within the corporate perimeter no longer are protecting them at home. So organizations must shift their focus to securing wherever the employees are. Plus, they need to be mindful of the main threats employees face daily, including social threats such as phishing, and adopt solutions that address those. All right, that's all I have for the headlines today. Please check back on Monday with another edition of the headlines, and please check the websites daily and often for the latest in content that we have on the sites. We do update often, so please, we invite you to check out all of the sites. Until Monday, everybody, please have a great weekend and stay safe.
This is Digital Anarchist.
Hey everybody, welcome back to TechStrong TV. I'm Charlene O'Hanlon, Managing Editor at MediaOps, and I'm here now with James Carter, who's the CSO at a company called Logarithm. Hey James, thanks so much for taking a couple of minutes and talking with me today. I really appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.
Great. So first tell me a little bit about Logarithm.
Yeah, Logarithm is a security intelligence platform leveraged by our customers so they can detect and respond to any types of threats in their environment. So we've been doing it for a long time, probably going on 16, 17 years now. In the industry, we've got 4,000 customers, so pretty successful for us. That's what Logarithm does in a nutshell.
That's great. So you guys recently put out a report called The State of the Security Team. Are executives the problem? That is a pretty compelling title there. What were you guys setting out to do with that one?
It's interesting because when we looked at the stress of the security practitioner today, at the end of the day, when you look at it, a lot of times it does go back to the executive support, how much budget can they hire or buy the right tools and technologies to be able to do a good job defending the organization. And I think the failure is on multiple fronts. I think there's the failure of the CISO side. A lot of CISOs or security executives grew up in the tech side of things, so they can speak tech, they know tech, but they have a really hard time transitioning and having that business acumen. And I think if you look at practitioners, that work for that specific leader, they just want to know that what they're doing is tied to the business, it's a core function of the business, and that what they're doing is important. And being armed with that support, being armed with the budget appropriately to be able to do that effectively, it means the world to those folks.
Is this the first year that you guys have done this report?
It is. It's the first time we've done this report, and I hope the findings were fantastic. Actually, that came out.
Yeah. So let's talk about some of the more interesting findings. What were some of the things that kind of made you raise your eyebrows?
I think there are a number of things. I think there was the lack of skilled professionals in our space, and we've always talked about a shortcoming of skilled professionals. And then the sort of crux of it too is that there's a lot of folks moving into the security space because there is such a shortage. And so now we're seeing even like a dilution of talent that was once, in the security space as well. So I think that has led to one of the findings around, being able to have skilled security practitioners. Obviously, the executive component and the budget component was another interesting find that was sort of top of mind for a lot of the folks that filled out the survey. And then the fact that a lot of them still don't have the tools that they need to be able to effectively defend, detect, and respond for their organization. And when I look at that, I'm thinking like, wow, even organizations that see security as a differentiator, there's always a lag in the hiring ability of the headcount. But oftentimes they'll invest in tools and technology. So I thought it was an interesting piece to see that a large percentage of them still lack those basic tools and tech.
Yeah, that's almost like a triple whammy if you think about it. If you don't have executive support and you don't have the budget and you don't have the head count, really seriously, how are you supposed to be able to do your job? So what is it that you think is happening in the security space that all of a sudden, they don't have this support structure that they've all traditionally had?
I don't even know if they've traditionally had it. I think they've been trying to grow it over time. I mean, there's still so many organizations out there that don't have a chief security officer, right? They have a director or a manager of security. There are a lot of organizations that just use it to check the box or that they want to be compliant. So whenever they fill out something, it says like, do you have a dedicated security team? Why, yes, we do. And I think that is still a growing and maturing area. And I think so. I think we've always tried to had an issue with getting that support and trying to drive it more. And so I think it's still growing and maturing in that space.
Okay. All right. It boggles my mind that this is still happening, especially when you consider just the headlines almost daily about, another data breach and customer information has been accessed and the severity of the fines when companies go out of compliance. And so it seems to me that the tide should be turning in the favor of security professionals, but it doesn't sound like that's the case.
No, and I think it's interesting because I used to present and tell people the best way to secure executive support and budget is to have a breach. And then, obviously, none of us want that, but we want to grab someone's attention because otherwise they're sitting there thinking, oh, this isn't going to happen to me, or I don't see, they're just that's not top of mind for them. And it sure becomes top of mind when they deal with a breach situation. So I think we're still dealing with that too, where a lot of organizations haven't yet been breached that they know of, and so therefore it's not top of mind.
Well, I guess I'm thinking it's not a question of whether they've been breached. I mean, chances are they've already been breached. Oh, yeah. They just don't recognize it yet. So
that's right.
So what about the tooling then, the tools that are out there? I mean, do you think that security teams are kind of maybe have a false sense of security when it comes to what tools they currently have and maybe they don't recognize the fact that, time moves on, and so do the cyber criminals, and they've gotten a lot smarter, and maybe the tools that they had, even a year ago aren't up to par these days, that that they need to constantly kind of keep upgrading their security toolbox to stay one step ahead, or at least in lockstep with cyber criminals.
Yeah, I think it's interesting. I think the organizations have had a false sense of security because of, the executive level saying, hey, look, we funded these particular security tools. We should be good to go. But then it goes back to, security is an ever evolving piece, and, tech is ever evolving. So it's like, the whole COVID work from home, remote,
right.
now we have to press security into their homes. All the operational technologies and sensor technology and all these different things that are just continually expanding that attack surface. Mm-hmm. And so as a security team practitioner leader, you constantly have to evolve and adjust your strategy to compensate and take into account those particular changing pieces of the business. And so I think it's just a constant evolution type thing.
So what do you think would be like the quote unquote most important thing that organizations need to do to increase their security posture, especially as more organizations are certainly not adding to their security budgets, but may even be throttling them back a little bit?
Yeah, I think it starts with fundamentally positioning security as a core aspect of the business, and whenever you're in healthcare, obviously patient care is a critical component of the business, but cybersecurity can also be a part of that too, because if you have incidents there, patient's data is stolen, something happens to the patient while they're in your care, that's significant brand damage and hit to your revenue. So I think, security has to really focus on positioning itself as a core function of the business, and then having a sound strategy around that, and then aligning tools, technologies, people, and process around that strategy is the only way to be successful.
So what about security in the age of this current pandemic, COVID-19 pandemic? Do companies need to really kind of maybe rethink their security strategies, especially as more of their workforce is going to be working from home at least semi-permanently?
100%. I mean, I think I feel bad for the manufacturing companies and government agencies and organizations that weren't really built to operate with a remote workforce. And It's interesting because I'm also a big zero trust advocate, and I talk about that, speak about it quite often around being able to not trust assets, people, data, and treating everything as an outsider, because everything when you're remote, you are, sort of outside your comforts of your organization, even though you may be tied back in. But now all of a sudden that strategy is getting a lot of, win in its sales from organization. They'll say like, oh, maybe now I should go for that strategy. That should be my strategy because I have to deal with this remote workforce piece. But, I'd say it was kind of a, flip of a coin on who was ready for it and who wasn't ready for it. And I think lucky for us, we started this zero trust journey a long time ago. And so we were well positioned for being completely remote. So, but
that's great.
Not all organizations were that lucky.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. I've heard some horror stories for sure. So in your survey, you guys came up with the top 5 ways to kind of reduce the amount of stress that security teams are under. It looks like increasing the security budget was like top of mind, or that the biggest way to reduce the stresses for security teams. But what other made the top 5?
I mean, I think we had the executive support was on there, the budget, the strategy, skilled personnel, tools and technology. So I mean, everything goes back to a people, process, and technology problem. And I think you saw that in the top 5. I mean, we hit on pretty much every single one of those aspects of things. And I think from a budgeting perspective, one of the things that people always forget is that security kind of came in late in the game a bit. So tech and innovation, all that was happening, and then security came in after the fact. And so oftentimes we're, in some organizations, like I said earlier, they don't have a security team, or it's new to the organization. So you're changing culture at the same time as changing the investment strategy. And I think a good indication outside of this survey is that security is starting to be a larger percentage of the quote unquote IT budget. And so it keeps going upwards, but I think people are just now realizing that we're basically playing catch up to get us to a state of reduced risk.
Yeah, we shouldn't be doing that either. We should be much farther along than we are, unfortunately. But I guess organizations, they're not going to be able to do anything until they recognize the fact that there's a problem and they need to remedy it. So hopefully we'll see more movement, especially as I said, as more of the workforce moves into a semi-permanent work from home, just way of life, if you will, and just. If companies can just kind of hone in on that, I think probably we may see some serious movement in the security of critical infrastructures and among organizations of all sizes.
Definitely. I think the media has done a great job of helping us out by publicizing all these breaches. I think you see a lot of state and government agencies now having, language in there, having these privacy laws come out that talk about breaches and how to do that. So the government, the media, all of it's helped, I think, in the long run of building security and raising the visibility of it and the level of where it should be within an organization. So I think the media and the government agencies and everybody else who's helped us along this journey to build up security.
All right. So you guys going to keep doing this report?
I think so. I think it was really well received and really good, interesting data that came out of it. And I see us doing it for at least the foreseeable future.
Excellent. So if folks want to take a look at this year's report, how would they access it?
Yeah, they can access it straight off our logarithm.com website. So they can go to the website and there's a link there to be able to download the report.
Awesome. All right. Well, James, thanks so much for taking the time and walking me through it. Great report. I love to see what the state of the market in the security space, and sometimes the news is not that good. So I'm really glad that you were able to come on and share this with me. Really appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks for having me. And hopefully, the next few times these reports come out, we'll see the trends start heading in the right direction.
Let's hope. So, thanks again. Appreciate it.
All right. Thank you.
All right. Okay, everybody, please stick around. We've got lots more coming up on TechStrong TV, so stay tuned.
Disruption is occurring across every aspect of IT. Open source, cloud services, DevOps, and cloud-native software architectures are democratizing IT and radically transforming how business is done. The old ways of creating software and doing IT are being replaced with agile, flexible, faster, and cheaper methods, benefiting vendors and users alike. Accelerated Strategies Group is out to democratize access of industry expertise and knowledge. We use our expertise and experience to offer insightful, intelligent, useful information in a variety of formats relevant to the IT community: digital events, videos, reports, assessments, workshops, and implementation projects with tech vendors, IT organizations, and business leaders. We widely and openly share our work products, often for free. Analyst reports these days aren't worth more than a graph or chart that tells a story or illustrates a market trend. We work with developers, DevOps teams, cloud architects, security engineers, and transformation leaders most every day, creating and implementing transformational strategies and technologies. We're not just thinkers, we're also doers.
Hey everybody, happy Thursday. This is Charlene O'Hanlon, Managing Editor at Media Ops, and I'm here now with the Thursday edition of the Webinars Preview. As I always tell you, we have a lot of great webinars coming up on DevOps.com, Container Journal, and Security Boulevard, as well as a lot of webinars that we've done on demand that are totally worth checking out. But I wanted to let you know about 3 that are coming up in the next week. Hopefully you'll be able to take some time out of your busy schedule to attend one or all of them. The first one I want to let you know about is called ML Ops for Production Level Machine Learning. This one is happening Friday, that's tomorrow, October 16th at 1 p.m. Eastern on DevOps.com. It's sponsored by Red Hat Marketplace and Converge. This webinar focuses on the core practices in ML Ops that will help data science teams scale to the enterprise level. Talking about the primary functions of ML Ops and what tasks are suggested to accelerate your team's machine learning pipeline. The webinar also covers how teams use ML Ops for more productive machine learning workflows. So if you're interested in ML Ops, this is definitely a webinar worth checking out. The next webinar I want to let you know about is called Microservices at Scale, How to Reduce Overhead and Increase Developer Productivity, even with hundreds of services, not thousands, hundreds of services. This one is happening Tuesday, October 20th at 11 a.m. Eastern on DevOps.com, and it is sponsored by Garden.io. Microservices have been a boon to development in many ways, but the overhead associated with them can be maddening. So over time, the application becomes too complex to manage effectively, and the reality of building, deploying, and testing a 100+ service distributed applications means there's a lot of time spent just waiting. So this webinar takes a look at ways that organizations can streamline the way their developers interact with these applications to reduce the complexity and free more time for them. All right, the last webinar today I want to let you know about is called The Future of Active Host Vulnerability Monitoring. This one is happening Wednesday, October 21st at 11 a.m. Eastern on Security Boulevard. It's sponsored by Lacework. So in the era of cloud generation, the constant activities around workloads and containers create more vulnerabilities than an organization can keep up with. This webinar takes a look at how organizations can streamline host and container vulnerability workflows to help their software teams who are building in AWS, Azure, Google Cloud, and Kubernetes. Definitely worth one checking out if you are working in containers, have issues around security, and just need a way to make the whole process run more efficiently and more securely. Again, that one is happening Wednesday, October 21st at 11 a.m. Eastern on Security Boulevard. All right, that's all that I have for you today for the webinar's preview. Please check back on Monday for an updated list that we have for you as far as webinars are concerned, upcoming on the sites. But until then, have a great weekend, everybody, and please stay safe.
Hey, Charlene, thanks for all the goodness today. That was a great interview, great information. Do appreciate it. Now that Charlene's wrapped up, though, of course, it means it's time for the Analyst Corner with Mitchell Ashley, CEO, founder of Accelerated Strategies Group, with some great commentary and a video interview today.
Hi, and welcome to Analyst Corner. Mitch Ashley, CEO with Accelerated Strategies Group. One of the, I don't know if I'd say lifelong crusades that I've had, but it's certainly had for the last, let's say, 15 years, is to really change how we communicate and get away from email. If I could have it a do-over, and I started using email back in mainframe days. I mean, so you're talking 80s when I started first using email, when the only people you get email were people on the same mainframe. But we've really done something to ourselves with email. And I look at the way we communicate, and a good bit of it is pretty productive. A little bit here, send somebody something here, et cetera. But we start to have conversations in email and dialogue and threads and people being added to it midterm, forwarding midstream, forwarding it to someone and say, hey, can you take care of blah? And guess what? You've got to read the whole digest to just figure out what's happening and kind of unravel it all. It's a mess. I really wish we could just eradicate email. That's not practical to do that. Email, I think, is actually very good for communicating outside of the company. It's one of the best ways. Now we can add people to our Slack collaboration tool and things like that. There are instances, but I kind of have the 3 email rule. If we're on the 3rd round of replies for an email, it's time to pick up the phone, start a Zoom meeting, put something on Slack, get out of email. and stop it, because you start to enter the echo chamber phase of email, and who knows if it'll ever stop. I think it goes on forever, even once we stop hitting the reply button. But I think what really kind of came to me, the idea of this, how do we change how we communicate, was actually with social media. And I did some kind of early social media consulting because I was blogging and podcasting, and had some customers, and when I was doing consulting work, to help them put together a social media plan. And first was just to help people understand what social media was, and why does this 148 character at the time with Twitter, how can that even work? And the way I used to explain it is, email is a sender-focused, sender-controlled medium. In other words, you control who's going to receive this for the most part, at least the first send of it, by who you add in the to and CC lines. Now people can then, whoever's going to send it next can add more people or take people off, but it's all in control of the sender. And you often don't get a choice. You're suddenly getting emails, or somebody hits a reply all and it goes to everybody in your company, which is a whole nother problem. But you don't really get a choice of what you receive. That's why we have spam, for example. But social media is a little different. Yeah, I can send whatever I want. Post a message, post a tweet, put a message out on Team or on Slack or whatever it is. And unless I refer to someone directly in that, which doesn't happen that often, it's really the receiver who decides if they want to see it or not. They join that Slack channel. They follow you on Twitter. They follow you and see you in their feed on LinkedIn or on Facebook. And unless they get a direct message from you, it's my choice about what I look at and what I don't. So it's really a receiver-determined medium. And that's one of the things about it, is that since it tends to be shorter in nature, it makes it easier, I think, to consume. It's what I like about platforms like Slack and Team and others that are made for really kind of messaging base. I get to choose the topic or the room or the group, the channel, whatever the organization is. And I can lurk and go in and kind of see what's going on and what are these people talking about here? Or does this ever get talked about? No, yes. Is this something I want to be engaged in? Great. If not, I can move on. I can unsubscribe. I can, remove myself from that group or that channel. So I have a lot of control over what I want to see and what I might want to check out that's happening to see if I want to get involved in. And that's what I like about working in Slack and Team and those types of platforms. And I was a reasonably early adopter of Slack. And I started it just within the IT team, and, we're going to use this, and that's just another tool in place of email. Well, if you find those things that are really dialogues that are happening in email and move them into a Slack or a team collaboration platform, you'll quickly find there's some attachment, there's some stickiness to that, and organizations will connect with it. I think we're also seeing this sort of now transition to heavy video conferencing. And I think of the amount of digital communications that we're doing now with so many people working remotely, the volume of digital communications has gone up. The volume of traffic on our Slack, on collaboration platforms, in email, and you add to that, of course, Zoom, digital communications, and other platforms for that. It really has amplified and accelerated greatly. And momentum carries so many things, I believe, in how we operate. And once you get used to working a certain way, certain style, certain fashion, or you've adopted to something new, if it happens long enough, it becomes part of your kind of working persona. I used to work with a salesperson who was a hockey coach for young folks. And he had a saying of, if you do it 21 days, just do it 21 days each day. And by that 21st day, you're in a new habit. You're in a new way of doing something, whatever the changes that you're looking to make. And whether it's 21 or 14 or whatever the number is, there's a certain point at which, okay, I'm used to doing this now. Or I found that maybe it's easier to communicate with people who are where they are. They're in this location called Zoom or Slack or Team, and so I'm going to go there. I'm going to try to go with the flow and go where people are and communicate with how they communicate. Well, guess what? We're doing so much digitally now. I don't know how your inbox is, but it pushes me farther and farther away of wanting to be in my inbox at all and just do things through collaboration tools. So I guess my point is that I'm raising is this is the year, I think I read in Fast Company, it's the 50th anniversary of the first video conferencing call that happened. That's how long ago the technology was first invented. Of course, it's come a significantly long ways since then. But in how we're now at the point where that is really so ingrained in our communication. And if we can back off some of the non-productive uses of email, try to find the right mediums, whether it's through a video conferencing call, through a online meeting, through a digital blackboard, whiteboard, through a collaboration platform, file sharing, whatever that is, and get ourselves out of email. Maybe we can start to make our lives a little more manageable. So personal opinion, just kind of, I don't rant about too many things. Email is one of those sort of scourges that we've released upon mankind, and I hope we can one day, I don't know if we'll eradicate it, but rein it in. Of course, I'm tilting at windmills probably, so we'll see if that ever happens. But I'm certainly an advocate as you start to use collaboration and other kinds of tools that more fit the way we communicate and work. And I think this whole digital work from home, work remote is sticking with us and staying with us is for the foreseeable future, which goes a long ways out, in my opinion. So thanks for listening. Appreciate you tuning into my rant about email. Hopefully it connects with you and you can find new ways to communicate that better fit where people are and how they can be more productive. I wish you the best. Thanks for joining.
DevOps.com is the #1 online destination for DevOps education and community building. DevOps.com covers all aspects of DevOps, including DevOps best practices and tools, DevOps culture, DevSecOps, business impact, continuous testing, continuous delivery, and more. DevOps.com has the largest collection of original DevOps content, featuring breaking news, blog posts, podcasts, and more. Visit www.devops.com to learn more. DevOps.com, where the world meets DevOps.
This is Digital Anarchist.
I'm joined today by a couple of folks from Cloud Truth. First is Greg Arnett, who's co-founder and CEO, and also Matt Conway, who's co-founder and CTO. Greg, welcome. Matt, welcome.
Thank you, Mitch.
Have you on. So, Greg, as the CEO, you can lead off. Tell us a little bit about yourself and tell us a little bit about what Cloud Truth is, what you guys do.
Sure. And thanks, Mitch. Grateful for the opportunity to talk about our project and share what we're working on. I am co-founder and CEO of the company. My previous background has been a CTO for several different SaaS cloud companies in the past. This is the first time I'll be in the CEO role, and I'm working alongside my friend Matt Conway, who we've known for over a decade, and we're solving a problem around configuration management for cloud native environments. We're taking a look at the challenges that customers face managing configuration complexity as it exists today, and looking a little bit ahead to the future and problems that we anticipate customers will be dealing with. So we think it's an exciting area that needs some attention right now. Configuration management has become kind of a stale discipline, and what we've learned over talking to 200 technology leaders, especially around cloud practitioners, DevOps practitioners, engineering leaders, is that there's an emerging pain point managing all the different dimensions of complexity that are evolving today, especially as customers move towards using Kubernetes and functions as a service alongside of kind of classic host-based architectures. So what we're working on will be offered as a service initially, and then we'll be launching into private beta shortly.
Great, thank you. Matt?
Hi, name's Matthew Conway. Most people just call me Matt, so that's fine. Grew up in Kingston, Jamaica. Came up here, went to college at MIT, and then stuck around. Mostly, been doing sort of serial entrepreneur at various Boston startups over the last 20 years, and I got together with Greg and started to pursue Cloud Truth. So excited to be digging into that.
I can relate to your story. Worked with some fellow entrepreneurs, friends on multiple companies. So not a bad, if you can keep the friendship, it's a great way to go about it. So I wish you luck on both.
It's definitely key to getting something off the ground is have that ability to trust and have the rapport, especially since, things are pretty volatile in the early days, right? We're establishing product market fit and learning, pivoting. And that's one of the goals that we wanted to achieve with this project was to bring the voice of customer into the ideation aspect as early as possible. Basically to avoid getting a false positive on thinking that we're onto something that customers care about, but then ultimately realizing that maybe we were off the mark. So we have a big investment in research as we are starting to write code to go down this path of offering a new service.
I always describe that initial period for a startup company as the three main questions you're trying to figure out is, what's the problem you're trying to solve? What's an approach to solve it? And will people pay for it? And that's kind of the simple version of product market fit and the process that you're going for. But if you can't answer those three questions, you might have something you create, but you're not going to be able to make any money at it. And so, especially in an evolving market, that's tough too, when it's not clear that this is what exactly people are looking for. Maybe they're not sure even, and you're pursuing.
And that's one thing we're cognizant of is, in some aspects, what we're working on is fairly leading edge, and it represents thought leadership that Matt has been working on for quite a while in his career around how to manage complicated infrastructure environments in a sort of simple, top-down, elegant way. So we're going to be educating the market on some ideas about what's possible. It reminds me of that famous axiom you hear that's often attributed to Henry Ford. When he was asked about what his customers wanted, he said they really wanted a faster horse. They couldn't conceive of the fact that a concept of an automobile could replace the horse. And in some aspects, what we're doing with Cloud Truth is we're causing a light bulb moment to happen when we describe what we're thinking about and the initial functionality. That's often the response that we get is that people tell us, oh, I didn't think that was possible, but now that I see this, that opens up a whole new line of thinking about how I might approach configuration management. So there's a leading edge aspect of this. The double-edged sword there is we could be too leading edge and far further away from where the customer has pain point right now. So it's sort of aligning those, the timeline is key. So I think we're actually just in time. I don't think we're going to be the proverbial pioneer that gets the arrows in the back, but rather we're going to be entering the market at the point where the pain is starting to be more acute. And that's I think, sort of the wind in our sails at this point in time.
Yes. Someone once told me the difference between a scout and a pioneer is whether the arrows are in the front or in the back. Not sure if that's a culturally sensitive analogy, but it does at least describe kind of what the challenges you're facing, right, ahead of you. So tell us a little bit about, now, are you privately funded through VC, private equity, your own funding? How are you sourcing the company for capital?
Yeah, the funding is a combination of, there's two traditional VCs that represent a majority of the investment, and then we're complemented by some specific angel investors that contributed from their own private funds, and then a couple seed funds invested in us alongside with those VCs.
Mm-hmm. Okay, very good. Well, so you're approaching a private beta. Obviously don't have product in market yet. So let's really explore what do you see is the gap in the market? Why are you going, what are you going after that others haven't solved or solved in the way you think it should be solved?
Yeah, there's a couple comments that I'd like to kick off with, and then Matt does a great job describing the specifics, because often what we're bringing to market is a distillation of his leading edge thinking around this concept. So we put some guardrails around the project initially in order to find a way to enter the market without having to be sort of a thing where a customer has to fire a tool in order to hire us for the job. We really wanted to be something that would be additive, it could live alongside and coexist with the customer's existing configuration technologies, and still solving a problem that we hear people complain about, which is sort of this lack of ability to get a top-down view of how everything is configured, the ability to have a simple way of understanding how each environment is configured compared to other environments. So there's some specific use cases that we're learning about through these product market fit research interviews. The thing that we're cognizant of is avoiding getting a false positive, making sure that, you know, what we talk about building and creating is genuine feedback versus someone just telling us what we think we want to hear in terms of, oh, that's a great idea. But when it comes down to like, well, would you actually use it or pay for it? Well, maybe not so much, right? So we spend a lot of time sort of pivoting around the concept of really, is there a true problem to solve here? And I think with confidence, we can say definitely, yes, there is. There's probably some nuances about how we enter the market, and that's what we're working on right now. So our private beta is a set of functionality that solves some specific problems today, but becomes the platform and the foundation for us to grow into a full configuration management system over time, which is where we actually ultimately want to end up becoming. But it's hard to go build a platform in the dark without having real customers start to use it as early as possible. So there's a little bit of that tension between enough of the initial functionality to make it viable and show what's possible, and then get customers involved with that cycle and then grow it beyond the initial features to a full platform. But I think it'd be great for Matt to describe sort of some of the thinking that's been in his mind around why Cloud Truth is needed today and what sort of customers have been trying to do in the past to solve this problem and then not solve it very successfully.
Great. Looks like the baton's now in your hands, Matt.
Yeah, so let's see if I can keep this high level without getting too gored up into the details. But you know, basically the problem we're trying to solve is you know, try and reduce some of the complexity with dealing with these large-scale distributed systems that, you know, larger companies have, right? You know, as a company scales up in size, starts using the cloud more, or even just as a large company, they tend to have a lot of distributed pieces, decentralized, decoupled pieces that make up their entire system. And those pieces aren't necessarily all, you know, built using the same technologies. They aren't necessarily all configured the same way on the same clouds, in the same regions, stuff like that. But one thing they all have in common is that, you know, they all do need to be configured, right? They all have a certain set of inputs that drive their behavior. And that behavior can tend to differ across a couple of dimensions. So it can tend to differ across environments. You may configure it in one way for development versus production. And it may configure, it may differ in you know, another way in terms of region, right? Your US stack may want to behave differently than your European stack, right? And how do you ensure that all of the configuration gets driven to all these pieces in a way that you can still look at the whole system from the top down and get the big picture? So that you can look at it and say, yes, I know my system is functioning correctly, or this is the state of my system at any point in time. And that's basically what we're trying to accomplish. Help you, you know, keep track of all this configuration and help you get it from A to B, so to speak. So, you know, if you're a Terraform shop or partially a Terraform shop and you have, you know, a lot of this Terraform state that's generated by Terraform, which contains things like your VPC ID or your domain name server ID, things like that. And then you happen to be using a serverless component, you know, over in left field, and it needs some of these resources. You can go and do all the legwork of, you know, making sure Terraform puts it in a place that this thing can then access it from. But our approach is a little more decoupling the two so that they can live without having to know about each other, which is typically what you want in a large system. You want things decoupled. But, you know, Cloud Truth will end up being able to look at the Terraform state, extract the data you care about, and ensure that it gets over here to your serverless application. So, you know, that's one of the mechanisms we're using to kind of allow you to drive configuration from the top down while still keeping all your pieces nicely decoupled.
History is always a great teacher. You know, if there are multiple paths to the cloud, most organizations will take them, right?
For sure.
So I'm curious, are you taking a roll-up view, kind of a management view of all of this, collecting all the data, or are you also looking to actually manage the configurations in one place, push those back out into those cloud environments?
So a little bit of both. The configurations that we are managing. Where we're starting anyway is we're starting with this concept of this converged unified parameter store. And parameter stores typically have very simple data. It's things like, cluster size or, port number and things like that. So the data that's in them is usually pretty small, and that's typically the data that's used to drive the configuration of a self-contained component. So we feel that's a good match there. So you can use this as a parameter store to statically set values for things that various parts of your system are going to need. But we are also integrating the ability in this parameter store for parameter themselves to be generated by getting data from other sources. So you can set up a rule in our system that'll say, go to this S3 bucket where my Terraform state file is and pull out the things that match this pattern and ensure a parameter that this with those values in the parameter store. So this parameter store then becomes this aggregation layer of your configuration across your system. So you could use it either way, right? You could use it as a driver, or you could use it in a read-only mode where you just kind of keep on top of how your whole system is configured without actually using it to drive the configuration of that system. So depending on the customer, we see people coming in on one path and moving to the other, or vice versa. So we're trying to play both of those angles because we think they're both important and valid for the overall solution.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I can see taking on an entire enterprise, being the configuration management. I kind of think of the title of your company or name of your company is kind of source of truth, right? Yeah. About the cloud. Is a big sale, is a big lift to put on, and maybe just being able to know what's happening by the 25 different groups doing 26 different things in all the cloud environments and being able to stay on top of that.
And definitely
that might be of value.
Yeah, it's, the source of truth is somewhat of a misnomer because practically speaking, there is never a single source of truth. There's always many. So we like to think of ourselves more of the record of truth. So we'll aggregate all these sources of truth and give you an actual realistic record of the truth of your system. Mm-hmm. And then, we plan to, this configuration database, so to speak, will be fully versioned, and we'll have a bunch of intelligence on top of that, be able to show you, comparisons between environments or other dimensions, be able to alert you when things change that shouldn't change, be able to link the changes of one parameter to another. So if you change X, you need to change Y as well. All of the intelligence you could conceive of that eventually would be valuable on top of a system like this. It's certainly in our on our roadmap, but getting from here to there will take a while, I'm sure.
So one path that this makes me think of, Matt, is, are you looking to tie yourself into the pipeline process in a DevOps kind of scenario where you're part of CIC, primarily CI/CD, for deploying, setting up environments for testing as well as production, so that those environments can be dynamically created using your product, your technology, as the input to that rather than other sources, scripts, whatever, configuration files, things like that. Is that part of your intention?
Yeah, exactly. So that's one of our integration points is certainly CI/CD, right? You need to be able to know the configuration of things and get the credentials of things in order to deploy things, right? But then there's also the applications themselves. Like if you want to be able to have a certain chunk of configuration control the live runtime behavior of an application without having to redeploy, that's another integration point inside the application, so that you can change some parameter which affects the behavior without having to do a full restart, which makes sense for things like feature flags and things like that, or just cache sizes, right? Right. If you notice that your cache is kind of low all the time and you want to try a higher one and see if it fixes the problem, you can do that. And then the other place that could be useful is in infrastructure as code pipelines, right? Being able to feed configuration into that as well as pull configuration out the back end like we do already.
Mm-hmm. I'm curious, and I'm not an expert in this field necessarily, but it seems like that then some of the more dynamic tools like a Kubernetes that's doing container management, managing clusters, configures of that, spinning things up and down, resizing, all of that. That's a pretty dynamic environment. How do you, it's not like, let me log into my configuration management, have it tell Kubernetes what I want. I'm used to working with Kubernetes directly. How do you fit into a scenario like that?
So with Kubernetes, probably it makes the most sense to have a config map plugin of some sort. So be able to plug into the live configuration of Kubernetes so that whenever parameters change within CloudTruth, they're immediately available within the config map within Kubernetes. So that's one angle of doing it. Another angle is, we have this concept of templates, which basically just a free-form text way to generate a file which contains references to parameters. So you could conceivably generate, Kubernetes YAML files with templates as well, though that would be less dynamic than a config map plugin, right?
Mm-hmm.
Depending on where in the pipeline you want to integrate with Kubernetes. If you want to do it at, within the source repositories, you can do it that way, or at CI/CD. If you want to do it at runtime of your cluster itself, then config map probably makes more sense. And then have a way to trigger, restarts or whatever when the config changes and so on.
So I kind of jumped us ahead into kind of how you're solving some of these problems. Let's back up for a moment and
at least thinking of solving this
problem. Why isn't this problem being solved in the market already, or who's partially there but really hasn't grasped the full scope of what you're tackling?
Go ahead,
Greg.
Well, I have a perspective, I think, and Matt will have a perspective. That's an area that we spent a lot of time digging into, especially during our fundraising process. As you can imagine, investors are always interested in the competitive landscape and who's out there doing something like this. So that ties in back to this sort of original thinking concept of what we're creating, and it's a double-edged sword in a way, right? We're trying to show customers what's possible, make sure we're doing something that feels relevant and useful at the same time, and avoid getting that false positive. The thing we learned during our initial research is that DevOps teams of any kind of complexity or scale, so when you get to teams that are more than, say, 20 folks who are working on the software or above, you start to encounter some issues that become friction and dimensions of complexity, like team scale is a dimension of complexity around configuration management that causes this problem to emerge. Too much configuration information is held as tribal knowledge across select individuals, and there's not really a great way to share that. Because then you're using sort of your Git repos as a place to store config values and YAML and JSON files, but there's not an easy way to kind of look into that from a system perspective to get an understanding how things are configured. And if you're not doing good commenting on PRs, then you're losing the context of why a setting's a setting and why it was changed and that kind of stuff. So we saw dimensions of complexity starting to emerge that felt like there was an opportunity to address this problem in a dedicated way. We encountered many teams that had built sort of a bespoke internal tool to address this issue in a one-off way. And that to us was a signal that if they're willing to invest their precious team time on building an internal tool because they had a pain point, then it's time to offer this as a generalized service that could be widely consumed. So that was an early finding that bolstered our thinking around, yeah, it's time to pull the trigger and go down and create CloudTruth as an offering, given that Matt's built tools internally to do this. My teams have in the past, when I've been managing DevOps groups, have built internal tools to do some aspect of this. And those tools end up becoming a drag on productivity. No one wants to maintain them over time. The original stakeholders that created the tool will probably cycle out of the company or the project, and you lose that knowledge that was valuable in the original time period of when that tool was created. So it creates a number of issues. We've heard from customer prospects that there's a concept of doing an archaeological dig through all the layers of cloud tooling that start to emerge in a company or a project that's got 3+ years of kind of active usage. And so that becomes a daunting task of understanding how everything is wired up, which tools are really being used, which tools are we afraid to pull out because we don't know the dependencies or how they're interacting with other systems. So those are some themes that we want to address with CloudTruth to be able to do kind of blast radius detection of how changes could affect the system, dependency analysis of configuration settings across multiple parts of the system become possible by having this configuration management data lake concept as a centralized repository. That's just a couple perspectives that would be worth sharing at this point.
Great. Well, I'd love to talk a little bit about roadmap, but before we do, I'm real curious. What did you learn in your research talking to prospective customers? People are in this domain, may have this kind of a problem. What did you learn that you were most surprised about or didn't expect to learn? And I'm talking beyond the obvious of there's not a solution for this or whatever. What did you hear from? Because oftentimes you hear from people you're doing research with of, okay, I have a truly different appreciation for what's happening and why.
Yeah, I can summarize some concepts, and Matt will have an opinion about this as well. We've been really good at recording all of our interviews and having transcripts and use it as a knowledge base that we look back into as we want to make further decisions to remind ourselves, what did we learn from that particular customer interaction? So we've done over 200 of these at this point. So it's quite an extensive knowledge base of lessons learned, so to speak. Some things that come to mind around sort of surprises is one aspect of the pain point that we're addressing seems to be more acute when the DevOps functionality is taking the embedded approach as opposed to being sort of DevOps is run and managed as a silo that is alongside mainline software development. So we often encounter those two different constructs of team organization and management. When DevOps is a centralized function that is managed by a strong leader, there tends to be consistent decision-making around the tools and strategies that are going to be used for configuration management. So they tend to be in better shape, but they still experience the problem that we're addressing. But more acutely, team environments where the DevOps function or that role is an embed in all the different teams that are working on, say, microservices or specific applications, and they often have a decentralized approach to decision-making, they're experiencing more pain right now because different teams chose different strategies for managing secrets or different strategies or tools for managing configuration settings. But yet the VPs of engineering, the CTOs, the CISOs have that need for having kind of the top-down view. And that's something that we can address with what we're working on with Cloud Truth. So that was one of the surprising learnings that I took away from it. It also gave us good insights on how to prospect for potential new customers by asking some high-level questions around how is your team organized? How are they making decisions around DevOps strategies? Because we can then fine-tune our outreach towards the ones that have the embedded approach.
Great. Matt, any surprises? Didn't expect to find this as you did your research?
Sorry, my printer just went off. I guess my daughter is printing something for school.
No worries.
Let me wait for that to finish before answering. But in effect, no. And I agree with Greg. That was the biggest surprise to me as well. Both layouts tend to still have the need for what we're building, but it was much more pressing a need with the sort of the decentralized team, simply because the lines of communication are never as good between teams as you'd like them to be. So Cloud Truth could sort of help accentuate that communication barrier, at least for that distributed team scenario. And for the centralized team, right? They end up building this tool anyway, so why build it if they can just use it, right?
Yeah, some of the other things we learned, are that there are other stakeholders in the organization that crave access to this information, like QA groups, SRE groups that live alongside of the DevOps functionality. And right now, they don't really have a great way to introspect the data, even in a read-only capacity. So we think that there's something there to solve with what we're working on with using good RBAC policies to allow other stakeholders have a login that would give them a slice of the sort of config management tree in an appropriate way. So that becomes more of a self-service. CISOs, SecOps, compliance audit folks need to keep track of how configuration changes are occurring, when they changed, who changed them, why they changed, for their reports, for their SOC 2 reports, for their FedRAMP reports. We provide an aggregation of a data stream that right now is hard to compile for them. So there's another area that we can focus on down the road. But right now we're trying to limit our surface detail in terms of how much we're trying to bite off right now in terms of a problem to solve, to get very laser focused. That will become our wedge into the market. And then we can expand and use that wedge as a beachhead to go and solve other problems where we're uniquely qualified with the amount of data that we're managing and the intelligence that we can bring to that data.
Great. Well, let's wrap things up. Just talking a little bit about your product roadmap. You said you're in private beta right now, heading towards a public beta, correct? Timing on that?
The private beta will probably run for a couple months. We have a close group of interested parties that really bought into the vision. They're able to deal with the early aspects of a service where not all the table stakes are available, on day one, as we'll continue to flesh those out. No one buys us for table stakes; they buy us for our functionality. But not having certain table stakes like a SOC 2 audit or a great strategy on how we're going to manage secrets out of the get-go will prohibit them from using it in production, but they can use it in their test dev, evaluation environments, and that's the feedback that we need right now. So directionally, we just went from sort of the 30,000 foot view where we're going to fine tune which problem to solve. Now we're down to like 10,000 feet, and then we're going to kind of set ourselves up for touchdown with the launch of a public beta that would represent a full set of functionality to solve a specific set of use cases, mostly around AWS, Terraform, SSM parameter store use cases, and as well as Git repos as sources of individual sources of truth that can tie into that single record of truth concept.
Okay, great. Well, how do folks that might be interested in sharing with you their views on your research or being part of one of your betas, how do they get a hold of you?
Yeah, the best place to go is cloudtruth.com. We have an ability for people to indicate their interest. We're actively reaching out to folks who are in the either DevOps leaders or DevOps practitioners for our survey. And through that process, we identify folks that are probably appropriate for getting into the private beta.
Great. Well, wish you both the best of luck. It's an exciting time in the stage of your company. Having been there a few times myself, I enjoy observing the process you're going through because I know how exciting and how rapid the learning is and creating a product. So
every day is something new. Thank you, Mitch.
Thank you, Mitch.
It's been a pleasure having Matt Conway, co-founder and CTO, and Greg Arnett, co-founder and CEO of CloudTruth. Be sure and check them out. Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
CISO Talk, to hear how real-world CISOs are dealing with today's real-world issues. From enabling secure remote workers to accelerating secure cloud adoption, defending against a pandemic of security attacks and beyond, CISO Talk covers the cyber topics you want to learn about. With your hosts, Unisys CISO Matt Newfield and MediaOps CEO Alan Schimmel, featuring a revolving panel of CISO cyber experts. This is where CISOs talk. Join us on digitalanarchist.com and techstrong.tv.
Thanks, Mitchell. Good stuff today, as always. Up next, guys, we have a double dose of Channel Roundup with none other than Mike Vizard. Mike's guests today are Onapsis CEO Mariano Nunez, as well as Morris Torres, Vice President of Product Platform Management for ServiceNow. Let's head over to the Channel Roundup with Mike Vizard.
This is Digital Anarchist.
Hey guys, thanks for the throw. We're here with Mariana Nunez, who's the CEO of Onapsis. They just landed $55 million in additional financing. Mariana, welcome to the show.
Yeah, thank you, Michael. Happy to be here.
So what's the plan now that you've got some additional funding? Where do you need to apply it? I'm assuming you bought everybody in the company a virtual beer somehow or other, but now after you got past that, where are we going next?
Of course, yeah, that was the first thing, to celebrate with the team virtually and do a virtual toast across the globe with all the major offices and the team. Well, really the teams dispersed through the world. So yeah, where we go now with this funding, the thesis behind the funding for us was to accelerate our trajectory to become the leaders in securing mission critical applications, right? So today we secured, think about it, 2/3 of it with SAP mission critical applications running on premise, running on infrastructure as a service environments like AWS, Azure, Google Cloud Platform. And now we're really accelerating the next journey for us, which is really covering the SaaS mission critical application stack. So Salesforce, Workday, Oracle Fusion Cloud applications, already those native SaaS applications that are connected into all these kind of core systems on-prem and hosted. So we're going to be investing significantly in R&D to accelerate that journey, and as well as in go-to-market across the globe to really continue our hyper growth in the company.
The perception, at least, is that patching and all that stuff, including all aspects of security, is somebody else's problem when I have a SaaS application. So what is the issue, and where does the security people come in that conversation?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's interesting as you start to kind of dive into these applications and you really realize the complexity of these applications. If you think about Salesforce, for instance, right? Salesforce is a very secure product. And it also grew through many acquisitions, many interconnected solutions that may have different authorization models to begin with, right? So securing the Salesforce Sales Cloud is very different than securing the Salesforce Marketing Cloud from a user access perspective, from a configuration setting perspective, from even a customization perspective. Today, Salesforce is really more of a platform as a service, so you can develop your own custom code on top of Salesforce that can introduce significant risks. One of the, I think, major topics as well that we see is the APIs, how you're, for example, integrating SAP with Salesforce or with Workday or Oracle with another SaaS application like SuccessFactors. Those APIs we're seeing that also can introduce significant risk. Maybe they don't have the right authentication schemes, they have low or incorrect configuration in terms of permissions. And at the end of the day, one of those kind of minor things could completely jeopardize the security of the data, right? Which is really what you're still responsible for as a customer.
What is the current state of the art in patch management of all these ERP applications that are out there, whether they're on-premise or in the cloud? Because when I talk to people, they're one or two revs behind. They may have multiple instances of these applications that are one or two modules behind at least.
Right.
And so the question then becomes, how do we manage this process? And is it the thing that's holding everybody up from being current in the first place?
Yeah, absolutely. If you look to even today, some people have the perception that as you go through a digital transformation and you're now running, let's say, SAP or Oracle applications in the cloud, if you're actually running them in a public cloud environment, you're still responsible for the patching at the application layer, right? And so we don't see a big difference of people that are running on premise. They may be 1, 2, even 10. So we have situations where organizations are like 5 years behind on security patches, right? Because they're so mission critical that they really do not want to touch the systems. When they move to an infrastructure as a service model, they don't really change that. That continues to be your responsibility as the owner of the application. And we still continue to see customers running in the hyperscalers who are significantly behind in terms of patches. When you move to SaaS, like a solution like a Workday or a Salesforce, you have more predictability in terms of the patching. Is really the provider is doing that for you. And the interesting thing there is that a lot of also security teams don't realize that you still have at least a quarterly kind of new release cycle where the application framework gets updated. And some of those changes could actually have security implications. So maybe the new version of Salesforce or Workday or SuccessFactors changes a role, an authorization, a configuration. And depending on how you customize, how you're using that SaaS or PaaS solution, that may have an impact on you as a customer. And you may need to tweak your configuration to make sure that you're not exposed to something that you would if you're not checking the system. So even in this, I would say, more vanilla perception or like standard applications, even they have a quarterly or even biannually release cycles that you still need to be monitoring from a security perspective.
Are the bad guys targeting these applications more? Are they starting to figure out that this is where maybe the money is? Like, to quote Willie Sutton back in the day, why do you rob banks? That's because where the money is. So are ERP applications where the money is?
It's 100%. It's funny you say that. We actually have that as part of our pitch deck for the Series D. That was our opening slide. Is that quote from Willie Sutton talking about like that? Yeah, at that time the money was in the banks, right, in the vaults. Today, the money in the digital age, the money is in these mission critical applications, right? It's your ERP, it's your CRM, your supply chain management solution, your HR system, business intelligence platform. So that's really what Synapse does, is to secure all those core business applications that is today where the lifeblood of the business is from a process perspective. So think about something like ransomware that we're seeing a lot today in the middle of coronavirus. if someone were to take one of these systems ransom, you're talking about halting manufacturing lines, you're talking about halting shipments, you're talking about stopping sales orders, manufacturing orders. So it has a significant implication in terms of the business uptime and availability and operation of the entire company, not just a set of Windows systems or laptops or devices. And when you think about the value of the data, again, it's not only financials, it's employee data, customer PII, it's trade secrets, it's very sensitive kind of IP. So it's really where the crown jewels are today, 100%.
How automated can this get? I talk to a lot of people, and one of the reasons they don't patch things is they're afraid that something will break. They customize some part of the application, and they don't really know if the patch is going to break that or not, so they're reluctant to patch it yet. We're shorthanded, and we need to speed this process up. So how do I kind of navigate those two tensions? Yeah, it's one of the biggest challenges in the mission critical application security space, right? Because you know, like I think conceptually, many companies know conceptually they have to secure the systems, but they really are risk adverse in terms of patching them, and with good reason, right? You apply a patch, and like if something breaks, you're still bringing that manufacturing line down, right? Even if it wasn't an attack. So one of the approaches that we took was really, we help you make sure that you're actually fixing the most important things in context. So if you come back with a list of like 1,000 security patches you're missing, our platform will tell you which are the 5 or 10 or 15 that you really need to apply based on what we see from a threat intel perspective, but also what will be the potential impact to the business. And the other one, I think the complementary approach is that our solution will monitor your environment as a compensating control while you're still being able to apply these patches. Or you may live without the patches, you may have to live with that risk from an exposure perspective. So our solution will be monitoring for all the way from external attacks, like people exploiting these vulnerabilities and trying to get access through these holes, to insider threats and people doing already with access in the systems, trying to do things they shouldn't be doing. So that way you can manage that risk, right? At least if you're not able to fix the root cause, you can still detect if someone is trying to do something they shouldn't be able and abusing this, and then be able to respond very quickly through integrations into other security programs in your environment. But yeah, there is no silver bullet. You have to really manage it as a program, right? Because it's a very specific and critical set of applications. Are you seeing any progress being made in terms of bringing all the vested parties together? Seems like there's a security team over here, a bunch of developers over there that are customizing a SaaS application or some sort of on-premise instance of ERP software, and they are then at odds with the people who own the packaged application. And then, of course, there's some guy running infrastructure somewhere. We talk a lot about this notion of DevSecOps and the melding of all these things, but are we actually making any progress?
Yeah, it's hard. And frankly, that was one of the biggest, I think, challenges that we realized when we started the company, that the security team maybe was aware that they need to do better in terms of these applications, but they were completely disconnected from the IT operations teams, SAP admins or Oracle admins, and now even the Salesforce admin or Workday admins. The security team doesn't even have a login into those applications, right? So there's a big disconnect there. And some of these applications, it's not also that IT owns them. Maybe it's the line of business. Maybe it's HR who owns Workday or SuccessFactors. So it adds complexity from that perspective. Then on top of that, you have the development teams that also, of course, trying to ship code as quickly as possible. And for us, which is very interesting in these applications, they're heavily regulated, right? So you have a significant pressure from the internal audit teams, external audit teams, to really make sure that the right controls are in place to guarantee the integrity of financials or PII. So we really kind of came to create this convergence platform, if you will, where you have kind of a single point of truth and convergence where InfoSec, IT operations, line of business, and audit teams can really converge to the same platform to manage risk in a consolidated way and really bridge those gaps or those gaps between the different teams and functions. Because otherwise, yeah, it's really, really hard. Today we see companies, before using our products, they're still sharing spreadsheets, sharing like screenshots for audits, and we're talking about Fortune 10, Fortune 50 companies. So just the level of automation we can bring and just collaboration in a single platform, that in itself is already saving companies millions of dollars in terms of efficiencies, right?
How smart can this get? We hear about AI and security all the time. So what is the state of the technology as we kind of look forward to these different algorithms that are floating around our networks and through our security infrastructure? What's real and what's theory?
Yeah, I'm not a huge fan of, I kind of hear in your voice kind of all these buzzwords, right? And I think a lot of things that were, I think, promised that really didn't work from an AI and ML perspective. The way we are approaching it, I think one of our advantages in this sense is the ability to go, I think you really need deep context of the problem statement to apply these algorithms for them to be useful and not end up with a million of false positives, right? Which at the end of the day, they don't really help anyone. So I think our advantage, our approach is that we have very deep context on ERP, CRM, supply chain, HR. We know how this technology works. We know how these processes interact. We know what's good, what's bad, what's normal. And we've been able to create very precise models to detect, for the most part, insider threat today. And we're expanding that, for example, to robotic process automation. We have customers that are telling us that they want to make sure that their RPA vendor, right, the RPA tool that's automating a lot of their activities, that no one has hijacked those credentials to really perform other type of activities in the system. And those end up having a lot of privileges. So we're able to really model what a normal bot is in an ERP application, and then with high precision, we can identify anomalies from that behavior. But you need to have the context. You need to really understand the applications in depth for it to be successful.
What kind of reaction do you get from the SAPs and Oracles of the world? And they're not always anxious to share that there might be vulnerabilities out there, or they're not too excited to have that conversation from a marketing perspective, at least. So when you talk to them these days, has their attitude changed, or are they more cooperative, or what's going on?
Yeah, we've been working with them for a long time. I can tell you that in the early days, of course, they were a bit more surprised about like this, right? Our findings, we were kind of the first group of researchers to find critical security issues, products, and other mission critical applications. But fast forward to today, I mean, I think it's a great example. We just signed a major partnership with SAP, strategic partnership with SAP about a few weeks ago, where now basically SAP is endorsing Onapsis as the go-to cybersecurity solution for their customers. And SAP teams are actually offering Onapsis as the de facto standard for cybersecurity, because they really realize that it's much better to partner with us and provide this level of security to their customers to minimize the potential impact of a breach and really minimize the chances of that. So we're seeing that with SAP, we're seeing that with Oracle. We have great also relationships in development with other service and vendor providers or solution providers. So I think we're seeing the market and the industry really mature. And at the end of the day, what we're really solving for is not so much that the vendor itself did something wrong. It's really how companies, and what you said before, how people implement and run these systems, right? A vendor can only go as far as releasing a patch. If that patch is never applied, then it's really hard to keep the system secure. Or there is a security guide. Salesforce has a very extensive security configuration guide. If the Salesforce admin hasn't implemented that properly, then it's also exposing the company with nothing to really say in terms of the vendor, right? So for us, it's really making sure our value is that we are able to bring their customers as quickly and as efficiently as possible to the best possible security level they could have in their platform. So I think it's a win-win with the vendors and with the customers.
What's your sense, or have you seen examples of organizations that get it right? Are there patterns? Are there things that they do that other people should replicate, things that leap out at you, go, geez, I just wish more companies would do this?
Yeah. Honestly, the biggest change or the biggest success pattern we've seen is that alignment with what you were talking before about, the alignment between InfoSec and the operations team. We see a significant difference when there is alignment and understanding that those teams are collaborating to make sure that the business is secure. When it's a confrontational kind of partnership, when it's security trying to tell the operations teams what to do without the real understanding, or the IT teams kind of bringing up a wall and talking Japanese or Salesforce and languages that are hard to understand for the security teams is much harder. So in companies where we see that collaboration, they go way faster with patches, they go way faster with configurations, they have good governance, they automate a lot. So at the end of the day, they save everyone time, right? Same thing with audit. When audit can leverage this automation, you suddenly see the IT teams excited about a security product, which typically not are, but because it saves them time, right? And they can, instead of providing reports and analytics and Excel spreadsheets, they can focus their time on really accelerating a digital initiative versus having to provide audit reports. So I think that the cross-functional alignment is one of the keys that we see in terms of a kind of a predictor, if you will, of how successful they're going to be in terms of securing the systems.
Yeah. So as the old saying, it's that pride thing that gets in the way, and then that leads to the fall, right?
Right, yeah. And at the end of the day, like we've seen also, to your point, the other side of this, where they like we've been called to do incident response projects in mission critical applications at many large organizations, and there's a lot of like kind of finger pointing that's happening. And like, hey, I thought you were securing this, Mr. CISO. And like the CISO is like, no, but these are your systems, Mr. Oracle Enterprise Apps team, right? And it really doesn't lead anywhere good, right? So it's at the end of the day, like in order to secure these applications, you need to bring these teams together. Unfortunately, compared to when we started the company to today, the level of maturity has accelerated tremendously. So now there's a clear understanding that when these companies go and do a high impact or high value asset assessment, these applications are definitely on the top 5, right? So that makes it very clear that, okay, this is what we need to secure. Let's get together and fix this versus keep playing this in silos. So we're seeing a lot of those initiatives happening, like they call it crown jewels in many cases. And that really brings the team together in order to understand that they need to solve this problem.
Yeah, sometimes I talk to IT people and it's like watching 2 ball players and there's a pop fly and they're both screaming, "You got it, you got it, you got it."
yeah, it's crazy. And again, if you think about these companies, they have, it's like even now with SaaS, some of that it's even outside of IT, right? Is the HR team or is it like the procurement team that's buying these SaaS solutions. So even themselves are feeling that they're also losing control to someone else. So it's how do you get them to realize that they still can have control, they can really grow their influence and make sure that the company is still achieving their kind of the business outcomes, right? But yeah, it's amazing when you see that. Unfortunately, we still see that sometimes, but for the most part, we're seeing a trend, at least clear trend of leading companies that are realizing that at the end of the day, if they're not collaborating on this, they're all going to be in that kind of headline. Right, and they don't want to be there.
Right. Hey, Mariano, thanks for being on the show.
Yeah, thank you very much, Michael. It was my pleasure.
All right, back to you guys in the studio.
ContainerJournal.com is the leading online destination for centralized computing-related content. ContainerJournal.com covers all aspects of software containers, from container management, data management for containers, container security, networking for containers, to the entire container ecosystem, Kubernetes, microservices, serverless, and more. ContainerJournal.com has the largest selection of container-related news, featuring breaking news, blog posts, podcasts, and more. Visit www.containerjournal.com to learn more. ContainerJournal.com is operated by MediaOps Inc., the team behind DevOps.com, Digital Anarchist, SecurityBoulevard.com, DevOps Connect, and DevOpsDozen.com.
This is Digital Anarchist.
Hey guys, thanks for the toss. We're here with Marcus Torres, who is the, hold on a minute, let me get that right again because I wrote it on the wrong thing. All right, try that again. All right. Hey guys, thanks for the toss. We're here with Marcus Torres, Vice President of Product Platform Management at ServiceNow. Marcus, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Michael. It's great to be on the show. I appreciate you having me.
All right, so this week there are no less than 4 more integrations between the ServiceNow SaaS platform and various DevOps platforms. You want to walk us through this a bit? Because you guys have been talking about this now for almost, I think, the better part of a year. So it feels like you're kind of working your way through various DevOps platforms and in some cases, even different services at different times. So what's going on?
What's going on is our customers are loving our platform and our developer base is growing. And what we're hearing from them is, I want to go faster. I want to put more people on the platform so they can harness the same power of App Engine and the Now platform when developing on ServiceNow. And so we've added 4 great new CI/CD integrations or extensions. The first was to Azure pipelines, Jenkins pipelines, GitHub, and GitLab is all part of the 4 different extensions that we've added. I think the only one that isn't quite live yet is GitLab, but it's just in those final stages. You know how those lovely approvals go.
Is any one of these platforms tougher than the other, and how do you decide which one goes first?
When it comes to that, I think there's a lot of great tools out there. Developers continue to flock and push the limits of not only ServiceNow, but all of our great partners and what they're doing. What we're really trying to prioritize is our customer. What are you building on? What are you and what do you want to see? Obviously, Azure has had a great following. Jenkins is synonymous with CI/CD traditionally in sort of different enterprises space, but there's a lot of great tools out there, including GitHub Actions, GitLab, and so forth. And so what we're really looking at and hearing is the voice of our customer, and that's why we're really attacking which one we're going after.
One of the things that people associate ServiceNow with is you guys are kind of, one of the champions of this ITIL kind of framework approach that a lot of IT organizations have used. And sometimes there's tension with this new rock and roll kind of DevOps kind of philosophy of moving fast and agile. How do you see these 2 frameworks and processes coming together?
Well, I think what you're seeing is just the evolution of agility, really, Michael, is what we're seeing is people, especially in these times, are trying to innovate faster, trying to deliver value faster. Think of all of the different business models that have been disrupted and had to truly transform because of the times we're in. I'm out there and I'm seeing how stores and grocery stores are completely different than they were before. And that's not really talking to IT, but it is talking to the transformation that we're having as people and generally in services. And so as people are trying to react to that agility, they know they need to go fast. And while trying to go fast, what IT organizations are trying to do is keep up with that speed and that agility, but do it in the way that they can really partner and ensure that certain quality as they go through this change, right? So if you look at sort of the traditional frameworks there versus current, what it really is just evolution and an adjustment so that you can actually drive the business outcome, and that business outcome is agility. And for developers, it's freedom to some degree. Part of these rock and roll processes isn't about just being cool. It's about being able to do it in a way where they have the freedom to really innovate and to build amazing, cool things and have a process that the rest of their organization can stand behind.
How are people constructing those processes? I know you guys have this low-code tool that people use to create kind of the workflows. And then those workflows have like maybe exceptions. They reach out to a DevOps platform, or, how have people been kind of using the platform now that you've had it out there for a while? What have you seen?
Yeah. So, one of the things is, kind of going to that traditionally ServiceNow didn't have all of these, kind of capabilities. You'd have to try to, kind of duct tape it into sort of existing processes your organization may have. But over the last year and a half, we've really gone all in on trying to make sure that, essentially allow developers to work the same way they always have been in other tools and other platforms. And so what we do here within App Engine, which is our low-code application platform, and just ranked as a leader in Gartner's Magic Quadrant for low code, is we just literally use the tools they're already using and essentially have a seamless integration with App Engine and the Now platform. So the way you do that is you simply just associate your repository with what you're developing on our Now platform and App Engine, and everything will just flow as you would expect. So say you're working as a team, you go ahead and do a various number of commits. You will see those within your overall repository. You can issue a pull request and just allow the whole thing to flow, including automated tests through our automated testing framework. You could even, build in, broader pipelines with some of your own tooling, whether that be, Selenium or others.
Do you think maybe we're going to get to a point where we don't need this kind of war room experience that everybody's had for the last decade or so, where I drag people into a meeting and developers come and they generally grumble about it, and then they're there for about 10 minutes and then they say this has nothing to do with us, and then they kind of say, it's this issue over here, and then they storm off, and then everybody kind of spends the next 5 minutes fixing something that took them 10 weeks to figure out?
Absolutely. I think what you're seeing is not when you see all of this innovation happening, how are we correlating that innovation to the rest of the business, right? One of the things we do really well here at ServiceNow is we're able to tie assets, whether that's hardware assets or software assets in the sense of code or applications that are being built, and associate that with the critical processes that are happening within your enterprise. And that's the benefit of exactly what we're seeing is you can build an application. We know that's tied to a critical process, which is part of an organization that has a value to a customer, all the way through that value chain. And when something happens, the ability to correlate, hey, we're seeing an outage, we're seeing a problem, we're seeing a critical bug being reported by a customer that's causing a problem. We can actually identify exactly what it is and what's impacting the business. And it's no longer a meeting like, hey, what's going on? It's actually highlighting this is the root kind of cause of the issue. You start adding capabilities around our process mining capabilities and other things that we continue to innovate on, including obviously all of our intelligence features, which is a huge layer and focus of our platform. And what you're going to see is people not losing time to sort of bureaucracy, but really being able to attack escalations or issues in real time as it happens.
We've seen prior to COVID, or as I like to refer to it as the VC era, that things were moving up to the cloud. Management platforms in general were moving from on-premise into the cloud. Historically, if you went into a data center and you wanted to know where the management software was, you just looked for the worst, slowest server you could find because that was the one it was going to be on for sure. As we go forward now, as things move into the cloud, has this transition to working from home and COVID accelerated the rate at which IT management frameworks are shifting to the cloud?
I mean, absolutely. I think what you're seeing, there was already obviously a huge momentum of going to the cloud for a number of different reasons, including I simply don't want to have to manage the physical infrastructure that I can get those same services and the same kind of agility from a cloud company. But with COVID, there's just more logistical challenges within that overall supply chain, right? And so, but the value and the demand on the business isn't changing; it's accelerating. And what people have found is they can be successful with the cloud, right? It's no longer, when it first started, when I was in the .com bust of the early 2000s, when it first started to get going, it was much more around fear. Oh, I don't putting data in the cloud, and why would I do that? But now it's just a fundamental part of the strategy of all enterprises, whether that be an organization that's small and getting started all the way to hundreds of thousands of people within an enterprise.
Do you think that as that process occurs that this will kind of accelerate the use of AI in IT management? Because it seems to me one of the challenges has always been there just wasn't enough data that the enterprise could collect. But if I can put it all in the cloud, now I've got a critical mass of data to throw some algorithms at that I might actually get something useful from. So are all these things going to be built on top of each other and kind of go in successive waves?
Absolutely. And, the cloud it just made AI and ML more available to apply, those algorithms or those machine learnings against it, right? Before, when you had siloed data, on-premise systems, you didn't have essentially a more centralized area of that data where you could start to run machine learning against it. Now that it's moving to the cloud, it's actually easier to do that. And that is going to drive a bunch of efficiencies, specifically in, around IT and service management. More and more issues can be done through self-service. On the Now platform, all of our products have added robust intelligence capabilities to really eliminate a lot of those initial tier 1, tier 2 issues and allow the user to get the resolution they need. For the end user, that's all they care about. They don't care if it went to, a human or a machine or an algorithm. What they want is the outcome they're looking to solve. And all of our capabilities we continue to add within our Now platform on intelligence. We've added a bunch of capabilities around NLU, NLQ. We've added intelligence around process mining. Our performance analytics is absolutely top-notch. This is giving the people answers and insights that they can get anytime. And that is the power that we're helping to deliver. And that's transforming IT, and it'll continue to transform IT going into the future.
Do you guys have any sense where that man-machine interface is going to be, or is that still a work in progress? Because a lot of people are kind of like, am I really going to be out of a job? They generally don't believe it, but they're a little, worried somewhat. So where are we going to be in, say, 3 years, and maybe where should people focus their energies?
People are using the Now platform to create amazing workflows that really solve business outcomes across their enterprise, and using this intelligence across, and it doesn't matter if it's IT and IT service management or customer service or employee relationship management through our HR product, or literally custom workflows across the enterprise for any number of operations. But what we have found is our customers, they are getting value where they're taking away these processes that they had tons of man hours for relatively simple operations, and they're moving that to an automated workflow through App Engine, through the Now platform, and through our intelligence capabilities. What that has done hasn't resulted in decreases or layoffs for our customers and their employees. It's actually freed up that employee to work on the critical items, and the businesses are doing better. And now that the businesses are doing better, they're going to hire more. So it's actually the opposite of what we've been fearing. At the end of the day, automation has its place in the enterprise. You can see that through not only the intelligence capabilities, but all of the RPA capabilities that we see automating sort of trivial tasks within an enterprise. But if you look at what those same resources now are able to do and focus on, they're getting to the more strategic, more mission critical areas of their job. And that's helping drive overall business outcomes, which is, of course, increasing value and success for our customers and for ServiceNow.
So besides eliminating a lot of the scut work, am I ever going to get to the point where I can just walk in the office and I'll go, hey, Alexa, tell me the 3 things that I'm going to get fired for today, and figure out how to fix them before that happens?
For me, it's not, I really see a future where we, instead of being, voice to sort of answers what we're getting today, it's really voice to experiences, right? Voice to UIs that are showing me key aspects and exceptions or exceptions in my business, or little spikes or anomalies. That's what I was looking for. Anomalies of of what's happening in my operations, in my business, in my products. And I absolutely think we're getting there. Obviously, the voice capabilities and the intelligence capabilities, sentiment, being able to read documents and actually correlate findings and analysis, that's getting better every day, right? And being able to come in and not have to deal with sort of filtering through it yourself and being able to just be focused on what is the problem is going to bring better efficiency. And similar to my previous comment, that efficiency is going to raise the value for our customers and the value they're getting from ServiceNow and the Now platform. And it's going to allow them to succeed and compete against their competitors and transform quicker to really capture more of their customer base and delight their customers. And it's going to start with, the people in the back office to the middle office and go all the way to the front office on that engagement layer. And that's really where we're focused.
So it's pretty clear that there's this primordial soup of ITSM plus IDOL plus DevOps plus a little AI. It's all coming together. So other than just hanging out on the ServiceNow website, what's your best advice to customers about how to get ready for all of this?
Oh, I would say try us out, right? There's, and what I mean by that is we have an amazing developer community at developer.servicenow.com. They can start to become part of our community, and within our developer instances that we give any of our developer program guests for free, you can try out all of our amazing new innovation for free. We are much more than just IT. We are really reaching across the enterprise and solving end-to-end workflows across your organization. And being able to connect not only to ServiceNow, but using Integration Hub to really be that platform of platforms to orchestrate, integrate, and automate work across all of your various systems, whether they be on-premise or your cloud platforms and other cloud solutions. And if you go and actually use ServiceNow and start to actually see and get that value of the platform of platforms, you'll see that our capabilities, our applications, our tooling, and our platform allows you to really bring exponential value through ServiceNow.
All right. Hey, great. Marcus, thanks for being on the show.
Thank you, Michael. It was great to be here.
All right. And back to you guys in the studio.
CI/CD pipe and put your observability on. Ground control to Major Tom.
10, 9, ignition sequence
countdown, engines on.
6, 5,
check ignition 4, and make God's love be with you.
What an amazing show we had today, guys. Just, from that great panel with the folks, great discussions, information, news, webinar previews, the channel roundup information, Mitchell, of course. I hope you found it interesting. I hope we kept you entertained and informed for a good part of the day. Of course, you can always go back to this and watch it on demand at TechStrong.tv or digitalanarchist.com. But until then, this was our Thursday show, so we won't be back live with fresh content until Monday. which I believe is the 19th, I want to say. And we will see you on Monday the 19th. But until then, have a great weekend. Stay safe, stay well, stay strong, tech strong. This is Alan Schimmel. We're out.